Good evening, and welcome to the City of Palm Coast Hybrid City Council Special Meeting. The city has offered this meeting in person and via CMT. Access to this meeting is being provided via live stream on the city's website, palmcoastgov.com, and by calling in at 386-223-1690. Should you need technical assistance, please call 386-986-2391. Today is January 5th, 2021. It is 5:30 p.m. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Holland?
Here.
Councilmember Branquino?
Here.
Councilmember Barboso?
Here.
Councilmember Danko?
Here.
Councilmember Clucas?
Present.
Mayor, all members are present.
Thank you. Before we go to agenda item number D1, I just want to take a minute and talk about how this is going to go this evening. This is the first time this council is presented with this proposal. So we are going to open up with a brief introduction by our city manager. Then we will have a presentation from our staff. Then we will have a presentation by the developer and the developer's representative. Then council, I'm asking you to hold questions and comments until we hear the presentations, and then we will deliberate and discuss and ask questions of staff and the developer at that time before I open up to the public. Each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to speak on this agenda item. We're asking for each person to be respectful of each other. This is a very complex issue. We want to make sure we're giving it the time it's warranted, and respecting each other's comments. We all want to hear from every single resident. We want to be patient, and we want to take our time to make sure this is carefully considered. So I know this is a long time coming. I appreciate all the residents coming out and continuing to participate in these meetings. And I look forward to your comments tonight as we deliberate this issue. So again, please understand that this is going to take some time, but we're asking for people, for our rules and procedures, not to be yelling out when people are presenting, not to be cheering. This is not about that. This is a city business meeting dealing with a very important issue that's impacting residents. And I want to make sure we give it the appropriate time and behavior in order to do that. So I will now turn it over to our city attorney, Mr. Reichman, on agenda item number D1.
Mayor, I'm going to read the title of this ordinance consistent with Florida law. It's the Lakeview Estates MPD Development Agreement Application 4150. The title is as follows. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, providing for an amendment to the official zoning map established in Section 2.06 of the City of Palm Coast Unified Land Development Code. This is for 280.6 acres, more or less, of certain real property previously known as the Matanzas Golf Course and generally located between 0.5 and 1.25 miles north of Matanzas Woods Parkway, west of I-95 and east of U.S. Highway 1, and more particularly described in the exhibit attached to this ordinance as Exhibit A. It's to rezone the property from master plan development without a development agreement to Lakeview Estates Master Plan Development Agreement, or MPD, with a development agreement by allowing institutional uses along U.S. Highway 1 and allowing clustered residential uses over the balance of the site at an overall density of up to 1 home per acre, with single-family homes or townhomes in the area located south of London Drive and west of Londonderry Drive, and single-family homes over the remainder of the residential property. This ordinance provides for conflicts, for severability, it provides for non-codification, and for an effective date. Mayor, Council, now that we've read the title, it's important that I remind everyone that this is a hearing in the nature of a quasi-judicial hearing. And what that means is that we're going to be making, this council will make its decision tonight based upon, according to law, based upon what it hears tonight, the testimony, the exhibits, the expert testimony, the expert witnesses. So at this time, if the council members and the mayor could go through, and if you've received what are called ex-parte communications like emails or phone calls, or you run into someone at Publix or whatever, and you received something from a third party about this matter, we need to disclose that at this time so that the public knows and the applicant understands that while this council may have received some information, it's being disclosed. And the public knows that notwithstanding that unsolicited information, this council knows that it's supposed to make the decision tonight based upon what's created on the record tonight. So if I could ask the council to disclose.
Yes,
Councilmember Aquino, yes, our vice mayor.
Okay. I have to disclose that last Thursday, I received an unsolicited email from Mr. Michael Shimento, and regarding, I believe, was Tract Tree. I did not answer that email. Did not have any other conversations with Mr. Michael Shimento, and all my decisions is going to be made strictly when I hear tonight. Anything that I hear tonight, my decisions are going to be made on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Clufus.
Thank you. I also would like to disclose that I've received several emails unsolicited, and I've also, throughout the past few months, met with several residents, but I've always been very clear that it's my intention to make a determination upon this item with only information that we received tonight.
I have received several emails. I have read every single one of them, put them in the public record. I, as well, have received an email from Mr. Shimento. I have not responded to the emails, as our city attorney indicated. I take the matter of quasi-judicial extraordinarily serious. This actually helps protect the residents in this process to make sure we don't face a lawsuit by being prejudged by items. We act in a judicial capacity tonight. That's why it's so serious, and that's what we're going to do. So I've not had any communication in regards to this. I've received communication, not responded, but have read each and every single one of the emails I have received. So thank you for sending them to me, and that is all I have. Councilmember Barbosa.
I also received emails. I responded by telling them I could not respond because it's a matter coming in front of the city council. I also went out to the site and listened to residents. I just heard them. I did not respond to them. And also, before I was elected, I went to the planning board, and this was on there. And that's it.
Yeah, I did receive ex parte communications without solicitation from many residents, both during the election, during the campaign before I was elected, and after I was elected. I also received one from Mr. Chimento. I did speak with voters during the campaign, and I did go out and see the site that we're discussing tonight. And I did attend a planning board meeting, I guess a year or so ago. I don't remember the exact date. But I do want everyone here tonight to know that I will follow Florida law and make my decision on the facts that I hear tonight and tonight only. I am guided to judge those facts by the city's comprehensive plan and land development code. Thank you.
Mr. Morton, are you going to introduce the item and then present?
Yeah.
Okay, hand it off
Thank
to
you, Honorable
staff.
Mayor, City
Okay.
Council, folks in attendance, thank you so much. Tonight it is complex, it is lengthy. We have Ray Chiner here tonight, who's our Assistant Director in the Community Development Department. He's going to introduce the item and speak. Bill Hoover, the planner, who worked on this, I believe, for 14 months, will present the item to council. I've got some follow-up comments, and then we'll keep moving on. So, Mr. Tyner, if you can open up, that'd be fantastic.
Thank you, Mr. Morton. Good evening, Mayor, and the rest of our city council members. Thank you very much. This is, as Mr. Reichman indicated, a quasi-judicial proceeding for a master plan development of Lakeview Estates. Part of our presentation is we're going to double team with Mr. Hoover. Of course, the introduction, we're going to talk a little bit of background of the previous zoning on the property. And we're going to follow up with some LDC review standards and guidelines of implementing a master plan development agreement. We're going to, Mr. Hoover is going to have some details when it comes to reviewing the concept plans. And basically, those concept plans, we're going to take one by one that are going to depict what the planning board recommendation is side by side with what the applicant's requesting. And then Mr. Hoover will talk about the public meetings that we held in the past and public participation, and again, the planning board recommendation. As you can see outlined in the red, this is where the property is located. It is vacant land. You can see it falls on the west side of Interstate 95, north of Matanzas Woods Parkway, and east of US 1. It's all the areas inside of the red. It's about 280 acres. This is a little bit closer picture of the subject property. If you look at all the SP, that stands for subject property. So where you see the SP, that's the lands that we are talking about now of potential development within the development agreement and the master plan zoning. We talk about MPD. What is a MPD? What is a master plan development? It's an acronym. A lot of municipalities call them PUDs, plan unit developments. A master plan development is a customized zoning district, typically utilized for large properties that have different multiple uses on the tract. A key advantage of utilizing the master plan development and the attached development agreement is that you can customize the zoning. You know, it's a negotiated document between the applicant and the city of Palm Coast. For example, you can customize setbacks. For example, you know, if our standard code has a 20-foot setback, you can write different language within the development agreement to say, well, 50 feet is a little bit more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Increased landscape buffers and those type of things. You're actually writing legislation into the development agreement that dictates the project and how the project moves forward. Many communities, again, call it plan unit development. This depicts the future land use map. The site is almost entirely greenbelt. You can see that in the green. That shows the subject property. The entitlements of the greenbelt future land use designation is 1 unit per acre. There's a little bit of conservation, as you can see with the circle on the southwest corner. There is some small conservation area as well, about 4 acres. And the zoning, as we discussed, it is zoned now master plan development without a development agreement. So tonight we are going through the rezoning process, and what's under consideration tonight is the development agreement that is associated with the master plan development zoning. As you can see, that the blue is the master plan development zoning, and the surrounding properties, you can see we have single family residential 2, single family residential 1, single family residential 3, and some institutional uses that surround the property. Now, some of the background of this property goes back to 1985, way before the city was incorporated. IT&T opened the Matanzas Woods Golf Course back in 1985 as a use within the county's urban single-family residential district. So the property was actually zoned R1B when it was in the county. That zoning district allowed up to 3 units per acre of single-family homes. When the city adopted our first comprehensive plan in 2004, we designated the property as Greenbelt. And what that did, it took that potential of 3 units per acre and dwindle that down to 1 unit per acre. And then within our 2005 code, our first initial code of our first 4 chapters, we wrote some golf course community, there was a golf course community zoning district, which provided some language on how to site residential units within that golf course. And then Mr. Hoover, as we adopted our code and did our citywide rezoning, some of that language still remained in our code, make sure that we can ensure compatibility within the neighborhood. The course closed in 2007. Again, in 2008, the city rezoned the property MPD, knowing that if anything was going to be developed, they would have to go through this public process, through the planning board, city council, via an ordinance, and look at the specifics of the site to go through the zoning process. The applicant purchased the site in 2019. The blighted clubhouse and the bathrooms, the cart barn were all demolished in late 2019. So the applicant's key request is they desire to develop 8.3 acres of institutional uses. That's going to be adjacent to US Highway 1. The applicant also desires to develop residential units at a density of 1 unit per acre over the residential portion of the site, except for lands that are designated conservation. The Greenbelt Flume designation specifically allows homes, again, up to 1 unit per acre, but allows for clustering these homes to preserve the open space and minimize infrastructure costs and be more compatible with the neighborhood. The applicant's additional request was not supported by the Planning and Land Development Regulations Board. And I want to point out in the development agreement that you have before you, the red is what the applicant is proposing, and then the planning board did not recommend that. But with that said, if you want to go ahead, Mr. Hoover, and Mr. Hoover is going to follow up with the rest of the presentation and provide a lot more details than I did on the development proposals.
Good evening, Bill Hoover, Senior Planner from the Planning Division. The next subsection is the review standards of the Land Development Code. And there's 5 key criteria. You'll see these 5 criteria pretty much every project that comes through the Planning Board and City Council. And planning staff, as well as the Planning Board, is required to review these rezonings for these 5 key criteria, which include, these are just a summary. A, must not be in conflict with the public interest. It needs to be consistent with both the comprehensive plan and all of the Land Development Code. It needs to not impose a significant hardship or liability on the city. It must also not create an unreasonable nuisance or hazard, and it needs to comply with all applicable government standards. So obviously that includes the city of Palm Coast, but it may include Flagler County potentially, or it could include St. Johns River Water Management District for any environmental and stormwater reviews. Planning staff reviewed the project, and we provided detailed findings on these 5 criteria in the staff report. And as recommended by the Planning Board, the MPD rezoning will not create a nuisance, hazard, or any compatibility issues, as it does meet the development standards and is in compliance with both the comprehensive plan designations on the future land use map. So that would include the Greenbelt designation as well as the conservation land use designation. The development is also consistent with 4 policies of the future land use element of the comprehensive plan. And then as the project moves forward, staff will ensure that it meets all development standards of the Land Development Code and all other governmental review agencies. The next 3 slides, I'm going to read these because I'm quoting word for word from the Land Development Code. And this small section of the Land Development Code is actually the linchpin for everything that we're doing this evening. J, existing golf course communities located within the former golf course communities or GCC district seeking to add residential units must comply with the standards established for the Master Plan Development District. In addition, the development shall utilize the following guidelines in order to minimize adverse impacts on any abutting single-family residentially zoned areas. 1, existing direct golf course views from the rear yards of all existing platted lots located within any residentially zoned districts directly abutting the site shall be maintained. Peripheral, in essence, side views from these existing rear yards may be impacted by new development, and new development may be visible from existing development. 2, existing golf course views from existing platted lots located within any residentially zoned area located across a right-of-way or a water body from the site shall be maintained to the maximum extent practical. And finally, number 3, multifamily uses shall be surrounded by fairways, clubhouse, and/or other golf course facilities to buffer single-family areas within the same development. The multifamily uses shall not be located within 150 feet from any existing platted lots located within a residentially zoned area. So you're going to see view protection zone a lot tonight, especially when we get over to the concept plans. And this is a term created by the applicant, if I remember correctly. And it's basically, they've used that to describe the landscape buffer between the rear of existing platted lots or homes and the proposed development. So essentially, that you're looking at what used to be a golf course area. In some places, that's just a fairway behind people's houses. Other places, it may be a wooded or a rough area. In staff's opinion, the Land Development Code does not quantify the depth or thickness of the view protection zone from abutting residentially zoned lots. And in our opinion, we believe this was intentionally done because you can't just say that, oh, let's make a view protection zone 50 foot wide. Now, if you've got a wooded area right behind your house, a 50-foot wide view protection zone, if it's got lower shrubs, trees, and whatever, that might work fine. Other places, that view protection zone is on the fairway, and 50 feet is not going to be very satisfactory in our opinion. And it's also clear in the Land Development Code that new development does not need to be completely out of view and may be visible from existing property. So that would include the rear yards of lots. So this next section is the breakdown of the concept plans submitted by the applicant. And as Ray mentioned, we have the applicants on the left, the planning board's on the right. The applicant updated their plans about 2 weeks after the planning board meeting, which is customary. So what is taken to the planning board, staff we updated what the planning board recommended, and ours are dated the 18th, the night of the planning board. And this is the overall concept plan, and it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see the number 1 on there, and that's where we'll start with track 1. Before I get into showing what track 1 is, I think it's important if we look at the legend, the tan colors are single family as we go through these slides. If you see anything in green, Like the dark green, that's an existing wetland on the north side of Tract 1. The lighter greens are view protection zones or proposed view protection zones that will be conservation area. When we get down to Tract 8, you'll also see a multifamily residential 1 area, which is the lower intensity multifamily district that the city has. And then there's a medium brown color, which will, on here, this is an old thing, but it will actually be institutional uses. It was originally submitted for commercial, and the planning board approved it down to institutional uses, which is less intensive than the commercial, obviously. Oh, excuse me. The two changes on Tract 1 that are different between the planning board's recommendation and the applicant's, if you look at the upper right-hand corner of each, the planning board recommended that the view protection zone on the west side of Lake Success Drive would be approximately 400 feet wide. And the applicant is showing 400 feet in some areas or close to that, but in the more narrow areas, it's in the range of 200 to 250 feet. The other key change is on the south side, where Laramie Drive is east of Lakeview, which would be down by the J at the bottom of the planning board's drawing. That the green area goes up about 1,050 feet to the northwest. The applicant's drawing shows that to be about 2/3 of that, or about 700 feet. So there's a difference there, about 350 feet. This is Tract 2. There's not too much that we disagree on. The planning board on Lake Success Drive on the east side, where the golf course sort of crosses the road, if you remember back when we talked about it, the view protection zones behind the rear lots need to be wider or deeper than side views. So side views, you can argue that the view protection zone may not need to be there, or it can be a lesser amount. So the 50-foot here that they're showing, the golf course there is probably 250 feet wide. The planning board felt that that entire area should be a view protection zone, because on the northwest and the southeast side, there's a road there. So there's several homes that back up to this area on both sides, where the applicant's showing a 50-foot view protection zone and probably about 3 single-family lots there. This area is the key area between what the planning board proposed and the applicant is desiring. The applicant's map, the proposed city park in the western side of the applicant's drawing, that was not there at the planning board. So the first we saw this was December 1st. And so that's a 4-acre city park they proposed. They've also are showing a private one-way roadway. There would be homes on the southwest side of that. And then as you travel to the east, they're proposing a short cul-de-sac with homes on both sides, or double-loaded lots, as we refer to them. They're also providing a 100-foot wide view protection zone for the homes that are on the other side of that fairway. The planning board approved this Tract 3 with no development at all. The other thing is the applicant is showing a proposed pond at the very northwest corner of this site, and that would be used to handle the stormwater for the proposed development. This is Tract 4. Again, we have some limits on view protection zones where the applicant is showing those 50-foot wide, and staff believes those should be, well, staff initially and the planning board followed staff that those needed to be wider. The other difference is the applicant's showing a proposed pond, and the planning board approved that without a pond. And that's on in the middle of Tract 4 there, and it would be on a fairway area. Tract 5 is the easy one for everyone tonight. The applicant and the planning board both are agree that this entire tract will remain undeveloped as a view protection zone. Tract 6, this is the area south of London Drive. In the proposed pond you see on the east side of the applicant's Tract 6, that aligns with the pond that I mentioned on the northwest side of Tract 3. So Tract 6 and Tract 3 hook up together, and it's the same pond. The pond was not supported by the planning board. Additionally, the planning board showed a wider view protection zone in the southwest corner of Tract 7. This is Tract 8, a little bit more complicated. In the southwest part, where the applicant's showing the flume evaluation required. So there's 4.3 acres of land that's designated conservation. How that came, and that's on the future land use map. How that was done, and Ray was here at the city back then. I think he got hired as an environmentalist originally, but they took aerial photos, aerial photography, and they used those maps, and they created the conservation areas off of that. So it was sort of a best estimate because you're doing the whole city area in a maybe 6 months' time or so. So, but the comprehensive plan also allows you, the developer has the right as they get towards development, and so these areas are 15 years old now, they have the right to hire an environmentalist and go with the St. Johns River Water Management District to determine actually where the wetlands are. So if it's a wetland area, it will remain conservation. If it's a upland area, it would change over to the adjoining land use designation, which in this case would be greenbelt. So the 4.3 acres of wetland conservation area may end up being half of that, let's say. And so that would allow an extra 2 acres of land to be developed for multifamily or single-family uses. It's important to point out here, the third criteria for section 3.0304J of the Land Development Code that I read to you, it required a 150-foot setback from neighboring platted lots. So that's very black and white. The applicant has agreed to do that. And there's an existing pond there. They're showing that that would stay. The only multifamily use that would be built there, so the applicant has a choice doing single-family residential or only townhouses. The townhouses would be limited to 35 feet. So where a typical multifamily can be much higher than the 35 feet, or it could be like apartments, that type of thing. This is Tract 9. The planning board actually agreed with the applicant to develop 8.3 acres anywhere they wanted on Tract 9, where they could fit it in. You can see there's a green area to the right, the planning board required that the 8.3 acres of institutional uses, which a lot of times we call those public, semi-public uses. Those are frequently schools, churches, museums, could be like a city office, that type of thing. So they can locate those wherever they want on Tract 9, and I think Tract 9 is probably 22, 28 acres, somewhere in that range. But the east side, they would have to have a view protection zone of 100 feet deep where there's already existing platted lots. So that's on about the southern 70% of London Drive there. So there, at a certain point there on the north 1/3, there's no platted lots, so they don't need to do a view protection zone. So they could develop that area up there. We've done a lot of public participation on this project. As you can see, the initial notices were mailed out about 14 months ago, and it was mailed out within 300 feet of all the properties outside of the golf course area. And the neighborhood meeting was held December 5th, 2019 at Matanzas High School cafeteria. It was rather crowded. We had approximately 300 people there, including 4 persons for the applicant and 5 city staff members. Meeting probably lasted 3 hours at least. 7 signs were also erected prior to every public hearing by the applicant, and the city staff ran newspaper ads prior to those. And at the neighborhood meeting, we provided sign-up sheets. If any of the neighbors wanted to be notified of upcoming meetings or public hearings on the project, the city staff would notify them by email of those. There's been 2 planning board meetings on this one. First one was on September 30th, and we had approximately 50 to 60 neighbors attended, when about 15 spoke primarily against the project. The planning board voted 7-0 to continue the meeting to an indefinite date and have the applicant and city staff meet to see if they could get consensus on the development areas of tracts 1 and 3. City staff did meet with the applicant several times, but a consensus was not reached. At the initial meeting, there was a lot of comments from neighbors regarding soil contamination and underground water contamination. And so city staff added some standards. I think that's on page 19 of the Land Development Code, and it provides some additional levels of protection for neighboring properties. The second planning board was November 18th. Not quite as many neighbors showed up for this one. This one was held in this meeting. The first neighborhood meeting was actually held over at the community center at Palm Coast Parkway. The second meeting, we had about 12 neighbors spoke. The planning board voted 7-0 to approve the master plan development, allowing 8.3 acres of institutional uses in Tract 9, with the 35-foot height limit on these buildings in the minimum 100-foot wide view protection zone along its eastern boundary to protect the homes on the west side of London Drive. So this will come back to you. Right now it's already been scheduled for January 19th at a 9 o'clock meeting. And once the zoning is done, and presuming that is approved, the applicant would file for a preliminary plat. That's a staff review, and then it goes through other governmental agencies, and then the final plat does come back to the city council. The planning board found the project as modified by the Planning Board in compliance with both the Comprehensive Plan and the Land Development Code, and recommends that City Council approve the Lakeview Estates MPD application number 4150, conditioned that it delete the red underlined text within the Master Plan Development Agreement and utilize the Planning Board recommended versions of the concept plans, Exhibit B and Exhibits B1 to B9. And I think Mr. Morton also has a few comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hoover. Just two items wanted to address that aren't necessarily related to the project plan, but wanted to clarify for council since we've received these questions, and I know these concepts.
Speak up, Matt. I can't hear you.
Yes, thank you. Sarah, I'll speak right into the microphone. Just two items I wanted to address that aren't necessarily addressed by the planning staff. They're not planning items. However, these issues have circulated around. I wanted to clarify them tonight for the council on the record. One was the idea that the city was involved in some sort of public-private partnership with the development, or with the applicant, the project proponent. This never did occur. We did not have anything approaching a PPP with this developer. Staff will meet with every prospective project proponent to ensure and try to ensure that the highest goals, standards, objectives, and vision of the city are articulated through any development. So there was a lot of course of normal staff work that our staff does. The second issue I wanted to address with council is the stormwater issue. We know there's a stormwater problem in the L section. In fact, I think it was just a meeting ago, the council approved the acquisition of 50 acres of land to begin to articulate a solution for stormwater, continue to work on our stormwater challenges in the L section. We did not work with the developer to accept any lands for stormwater designation, and there was three primary reasons to that. One, it was in staff's opinion that the lands presented were not in hydrologic continuity or not in the best use of what we were trying to accomplish for stormwater. Second, these stormwater sites were proposed to become 5-year open dig sites, and we did not feel that was appropriate to entertain that negotiation on the residents who would have to live with an open site for up to 5 years while excavations occurred. And thirdly, we did not want the appearance or reality of any type of bargaining happening for increased density or other concessions. So we chose to not engage in those discussions, but that was not an advocation that we don't know. We're trying to solve stormwater issues out in the L section.
We'll now ask for the developer or the representative to come and present. And again, residents, for those that came in after the opening comments, please be respectful during this presentation. Following the developer's presentation, council will begin to ask questions, we'll begin to discuss the item, then I'll open it up to the public, but please be patient and respectful of everyone here tonight. Thank you.
Council, good evening. Michael Schimento for the applicant. Before we get started, to make things easier for everybody up there, I have put together a PowerPoint presentation that the public will see, but sometimes on your screens they may be small, so I provided you with copies of them.
You could just give it to the clerk and she will distribute, please, Mr. Schimento.
You have enough? Okay. Okay. Well, to begin with, thank you for scheduling this special meeting on a very important project that affects the city, my client, the property owner, and the residents in the L section. This has been 2 years in the making, and certainly was not a public-private partnership, but those of you who have been at this long enough understand that PUDs, MPDs, are, as Ray said, negotiated solutions, and part of the things that MPDs have to do is provide public benefit. And so when we get into this one and all the others that come before you, in my experience, there's always discussions about creating a special land development code for a project and providing benefits not only for the developer and its residents, but for the community. So there certainly was no PPP, but I do want to suggest that in every MPD agreement that we do, particularly here in the city, there's a win-win, PPP or win-win. And so we often look at those things. So we started this off in November of 2008. And some of the things that is flavor, I think, can help you understand where we sit today. So in 2008, let me back up, here we are. You see the power, do you have the PowerPoint in front of you? I'm sorry. So again, 2004 and 2007, the golf course closed. So from 2007 through 2019, May, the golf course was closed and was owned by one or two different entities. And for a period of about 5 years, from 2012 to 2016, if you may recall, the city had significant problems with the prior owner. The community had significant problems with the prior owner about maintaining it, about vagrancy. We had lots of things that happened, flooding, mowing, if you recall. And so when we got involved in this project in the fall of 2018, the first thing we did was we talked to your staff. And we said, hey, we're interested in this project, in this property, but we're not interested in buying a problem, right? And so the discussions, the win-win between the owner, potential owner at that time, and the city began. So November of 2018. And it was in about in April of 2018 when we purchased the property. The city was involved in defending a bankruptcy. The city was involved in a foreclosure. And the city was potentially going to own this property with all its problems. So along came my client, and we worked with city staff, and we came to an agreement that said, listen, you guys just clean up the property. You all had resolved your lawsuit by that time with that owner that had been a problem for the city and the residents for many, many years. So we closed in April, and in May, within 3 weeks, we met with your staff on site, and we demolished everything. We mowed the necessary areas. We cleaned up the property. We removed the debris. We had trespass and vacancy and homeless removed. And that all happened within about 3 weeks of our ownership of the property. So that is May. So I just want you to understand that this has been a working relationship with the city. So not only between that time, that's May of 2019, so between December and May, we had met with staff. And we had met with them and talked about many of the issues that affected the community in the L section. Lots of them particularly was, as Mr. Morton said, flooding that has happened over the years. There was lack of public park. There was emergency access issues. There were lots of issues that we discussed with staff at that time. So we close on the property there and we begin the process, okay? I'm gonna move this along. So again, remember this, the golf course closed in 2007. So it's been closed for that many years. The city letter dated, I forget what date it was, but you all sent out a letter to the residents of that area, specifically state that it was no longer a golf course and that it could go back to its natural state. And what's interesting that we have, as Bill and your staff talked about, the linchpin here is that code section 3.02 and J that talk about this view issue. Important information for you all to understand, understanding the equities of trying to get a healthy project, that on tracks 1 and 3, there are 106 lot owners, 106 lot owners. 57 of those lot owners purchased the property after the golf course shut down. And 851 of those people, of those unit owners or lot owners, had purchased the property 2012, 5 years after the golf course had been closed, and you all were having these problems with the community. The document that I gave you in the back is the backup showing you that. And if you look, you can see in light blue and dark blue, those residents that purchased. And I just add that to your flavor as to what the community's expectations of this defunct golf course for 14, 17 years now, 14 years has been. So what we're here asking you all is to take a look at our proposal that we believe meets all the requirements of the city, creates a win-win, and gives the residents in that area lots of advantages, lots of benefits that your city staff proposal did not want to talk about. So let's continue on. So as I tell you, we started this, and the first plan came to city staff 8 months after we began the discussion, and this was the original one. As you can see along Tract 3, there was a double-loaded road, and there were more homes on Tract 1, which are those at issue. And on Tract 9, which is all the way to the west, there was a commercial development. Those were discussions we were having with staff at that time. After that initial meeting with staff, we went back to the drawing board and we created this one on 8/28. We did a new site plan. We continued to work with staff, and on October 1, 2019, we have this proposal. I draw to your attention what was going on Tracts 1 and 3, which is what we're really here talking about, I think, in the development of that. Discussions for 9 months, 10 months. No discussions about no development on Tracts 1 or 3. Here we go into October 16th. So we're now 4 iterations, multiple meetings with staff. At that point in time, we're talking with them about all the needs of the community. We're talking with providing them, the city, with lands so that they could have to provide stormwater ponds for flooding. Don't have to go out and purchase it. You can have it. Yes, there was discussions about dredging it. We would use that fill for our project. It was negotiable. But at the end of the day, city staff, after 6 months or 10 months, decided that they did not want to provide they didn't want any lands from us to provide stormwater. Lands for free. We had gone out and done studies, hydrological studies. What Mr. Morton said tonight about the reasons why, it was the first time that we became aware of that. We talked about the donation of lands for ponds, the donation of drainage easements, traffic improvements and beautification projects. We talked about sidewalks, adding sidewalks. We talked about providing parks and playgrounds. We talked about providing bike paths. Remember, the old golf cart course has all the cart paths that could be used for bike paths for that community. We talked about creating a canoe and kayak launch. We talked about providing bus stops for the children in there, given the history of this area. We talked about creating bird and gopher tortoise sanctuaries on Tract 2. We talked about providing emergency evacuation, because there is none, out to US 1 in the event something happens. And we talked about creating conservation areas. All those things were discussions from the beginning of 2019 through October 28th, November 12th, we have site plans. November 21st, we have site plans. And then we come to an area. I want to remind you, up until this point, there hasn't been one suggestion about no development on Tract 3 or Tract 1, okay? So we take our application and we go to the public hearing, or the community meeting that was discussed, and there were lots and lots of comments by those people, and that's what that meeting is for, is to hear what the community has to say. And this was their opportunity to let us know, and not to be silly, but they certainly did that. It was about a 4-hour meeting, and we went back to the drawing board. In fact, we went back to the drawing board and we got engaged in the community. We've had meetings at people's houses about this project. We've been engaged in the L section group, listening to them and monitoring their issues. We've been part of the Matanzas Woods Golf Course Development group, that is a private group that talks about the issues that they wanted to see. And so we have had the opportunity to work with the community up there to provide all these community projects that I previously talked about that were never, ever, ever talked about with staff after February 2nd. So we're riding along this train in December. We have the community meeting. And as a result of it, what I have in front of you here is a summary of the hundreds and hundreds of comments from the community that we have put together, and they're in front of you. The big issues were, there was discussions about do you have to maintain a golf course? There's covenants and restrictions. Well, that's just not accurate. There are covenants and restrictions, and as your planning board attorney noted, those are private covenants that the city does not enforce. There was discussions about there's going to be crime up there with Section 8 housing. There's no Section 8 housing there. There's no low-income housing. There's no multifamily housing. The community was concerned about utilities. Is there enough water and sewer and infrastructure? That was addressed. We talked about species. People were talking about rat infestations, gopher tortoise, bugs and bunnies, alligators. We talked about adding sanctuaries for animals up there, gopher relocation areas. We talked about, this community was concerned about the conservation areas that we proposed, would they be in perpetuity? And so yes, they would be in conservation in perpetuity, and we were willing to give those to the city or to St. John's Water Management District or the Army Corps, whichever was necessary. Issues of flooding were a big concern, as we talked about. We had already offered, up until this point, multiple acres of land, just giving it to the city so that they didn't have to purchase anything, so they could accommodate the drainage issues up there. We talked about the environmental issues. Yes, this was an old driving or an old golf course, and as a result of that concern, us and city staff, well, I should say we did, we retained the appropriate experts. It's in your reports, and we did a study on the project, and it did show up with a little bit of arsenic on the areas where the old driving range is. And as Ray said to planning board, and then would say to you tonight, that those issues are all mandated by the state and federal government on how to clean up. And before anything can be constructed there, there is a process and procedure on how to clean up that area of arsenic on the old driving range. So we're taking care of those. Traffic concerns. All projects have issues of traffic concerns. Obviously, your staff knows that, and so there is a traffic study out there. And the traffic study shows that there are no adverse impacts to the roadway system in the area. Yes, there will be more cars, but that doesn't mean that there's adverse impact. The traffic study shows that those roads, particularly Lakeview, operates at a level of service B, which is well below the threshold. So we evaluated that. Children's safety. We volunteered to add bus stops. The other thing that was a big issue, and particularly with the prior program, which showed this, double-sided lots on Tract 3, and those in Tract 1, is people were concerned about the size of the lots and how that equates to values. That was a major, major concern. Are these going to be small, cheap houses? Are they going to be small lots? Yes, they were at that time proposed to be smaller lots, and that was a big issue for the community. And so on 12/5, we heard all this. We got engaged with the community. We monitored all the social media, making sure that we understood what the issues were, and we went back to the drawing board. We met with staff multiple times, and on January 14th, this is the plan we came back with, okay? We added buffers. We increased the size of the lots on Tract 1 to 12,000 square foot lots that are larger than the adjacent lots. We provided larger buffers on Tract 1. We provided areas on Tract 9 and 10 we originally had for commercial, and we downzoned it to the institutional and provided for a buffer there. So that's January 14th. We're now 13 months into a win-win process. January 22nd, the plan gets revised and submitted. No issues. February 20th, a month before the intended planning board, and we get this from staff. Staff makes a pivot and says there'll be no development on Tract 1 below the line. First time in 12 months. Why? We're told that that was the decision that staff had made. Okay, that's fine. But also note that at this point in time, there's nothing in the PUD about the community projects that we had proposed. So in our opinion, the project that we want to provide provides us with a viable project It protects the views that we'll talk about here shortly, but also provided for all the community projects that we wanted and thought we could provide for the community and make that community better. There is a common theme in this social media that the L section was the forgotten section. I'm sure some of you have heard that. Well, we understand that, and we want the L section to be great, because when the L section is great, our project is great. So we knew at that time on 2/28 that staff had changed their direction on the development of tracks 1 and 3 particularly, as well as tracks 9. And we continued to go back and forth for months. And remind you, this is COVID, so we are slow. You guys have other things to worry about than this project. And it languishes for up until September. September, we come out of the gate. Staff is still talking about this, and we're offering viewshed protections. We're offering the plan. So we go to planning board, right? Let me back up. So we hear from staff that this viewshed issue that they talked about is concerning them. What does that mean? As I said earlier, maybe I didn't, even your staff says that this section, there's no real clear, it's not real clear as to what this means. We can get into that in just a minute. So I'm telling you, in this period of time, staff pivots because of this issue. And what does it mean? Me, personally, I would suggest that, unfortunately, this code does not take into account what is going on today. This code was written in 2004 when there was pressure to redevelop golf courses. The city already had a PUD that redeveloped Pine Lakes. There is this section that talks about existing golf course. It talks about words like fairways. It talks about things that are on an active golf course, which we don't have and hasn't been for 14 years, right? And so it's hard to make this land development code section applicable to a piece of property that is not a golf course, and as the city has already declared, will go back to its natural state. Whether it's right now, where the grasses and trees are growing at 4, 6, 8 feet, or in 2 years, or in 7 years, where it'll be a forest. What is the existing golf course views? They will never be golf course views again. And so how does the city staff apply this? They've explained to you how they feel and what it means. So, we understand that, and what we do is we go back to the drawing board and we try to become sensitive to this issue without having to butcher the project, as though I discussed as when staff pivoted in February of 20. So, to reemphasize this, I don't know how to play this. I mean, here's your planning director at the planning board. Can you play that? Oh, can you play that? And it's important because this is the conundrum that your staff and the property owner are in.
It says peripheral views. It clearly says that it's not out of sight, out of mind on that, and that's what's been very difficult working for the last 9-10 months with the applicant to come up with, what does this mean, because it's not real clear. And so that's the problem. This section that they are applying, particularly to tracks 1 and 3, is not real clear. It applies to a golf course, but there is no golf course and never will be. So how do we address that and balance the needs of the community, as we're proposing to do, and get a good project that is good not only for the city but for those residents? I think staff would agree in our discussions that this is a policy issue for you all, that you all need to decide is what does this mean and what's reasonable, I guess. So we come down to planning board, and planning board was about a 3.5 hour meeting. And if you go back and watch it, there was a lot of good that came out of it. There were people that talked positively of the project. There were people that talked about the developer working together. Even some of your planning members talked about it. But the motion was made and says that can staff and the developer go back, particularly on tracks 1 and 3, and maybe close the gap between the discrepancies between tracks 1 and 3. That was approved, and we go back to staff to talk about the discrepancies between tracks 1 and 3. That was September 30th. in, let's go back. And then in November of 20, we had the planning board. So about 4 weeks later, we go back, 6 weeks later. The problem is that staff had taken the position, as they declared at the planning board, that they weren't willing to close the gap, that their opinion was their opinion, and that they weren't interested in working with us to try to find a solution that, quote, closed the gap as requested. So the planning board heard the matter, didn't have much to go on. We didn't meet that, so it wasn't quite true that we couldn't get there. I told your planning board that we didn't have a partner in which we could discuss closing the gap. So the planning board did what they did. They agreed in part with us, they agreed in part with staff, and that's the recommendation that they made. But despite that, we had to make a decision at that point in time because we're not really comfortable with what the planning board decided either. And so what we bring to you today is our proposal to you all, our proposal to the city, our proposal to the residents of the L section as to what we want to do, how it accomplishes and addresses the policy, the Land Development Code policy about view sheds, and also how we can provide community projects for the L section that is for the betterment of all, including my client at the end of the day. So with that, we wanted to get into the difference of concept plans. Bill went through those, and we're close on some, farther apart on others, and we're asking that you work with us so that we can provide a really great project for the community. So on the left is our plan, and on the right is the city's plan. I draw to your attention the city's plan that they proposed, particularly on Tract 1. Notice where the green line, and you know, interesting how they're just straight lines, and how that has even changed since the February 20th, which doesn't have the vertical straight lines. So staff has really retreated, pivoted when it comes to Tracts 1 and 3 for the reasons that they can describe to you. But regardless, we're here to ask you for approval for us. So we're going to go through Tracts 1 through 9 and 10. Most of them will just be very quick. But really, I'm asking you to take a look at Tracts 1 and 3 particularly, because those are the meat of the difference between us and staff and pretty much planning board. So, Tract 1. Tract 1, you see on the right, is what staff came back with and continues to shrink in our opinion. We have pushed the envelope as hard as we can to provide a reasonable development. And so on ours, we have 200 to 250 feet of buffer between the lots of those residents that are adjacent to the old fairway. Those lots, some of them have views of the lake. Some of them, and most of them, have views of trees. Of the old fairway might have been partially obstructed, and some of them just see pure forest. So when we go back to trying to apply a policy on an active golf course to a defunct golf course, I'll suggest is going to be a forest, how do we accomplish something that's for the benefit of it? So we would like you all to consider our Tract 1, which provides for 200 to 200 feet buffers along the eastern edge and about a 450-foot buffer along the bottom for those residents, so that we can accommodate the lots that we want to put in there, and we'll provide all the drainage. We had proposed to make that entire thing drainage ponds maintained by the HOA for the benefit, because we all know that if your property is against the woods or property against water, there's probably a better value when you're going with resale against water. So that's what we wanted to do on Tract 1. Now, what's interesting is we've taken, it's very hard to understand this stuff, so we hired a company out of Canada to take our plan and overlay it over the actual property. This is a drone footage, and it's digitized. So if we can go through there, and let me see if I can do this. And we can stop along the way and just kind of pause and look at it. So this is starting from the southernmost boundary of the property, and we're going to fly north, and then we're going to fly west out towards US 1. So this is how it looks digitized in the project that we want to provide. Okay, if you could please. So that's Lakeview Boulevard on this left. You'll notice that we're have promoted plantings along the road. This is a 200-foot buffer at the bottom with existing stormwater pond and adding stormwater volume to that from those homes. This is an existing house. If you could pause. Sorry. Laser? You want a laser? So I do want to draw your attention that as we proceed through here, you can see the homes and their views. At the bottom, those homes who the city wants over 1,000 feet look existing into a forest. Those homes on the right, those homes, some of them have partially obstructed views with forest, some of them have no view, and some of them do have a view of the existing lake. We're proposing adding vegetation, adding and helping that forest grow faster. So as we continue north, we can see this is the layout that we're proposing, 250 feet. The island there that you'll see next is the existing island, and there's a stormwater pond around it that will all remain. We have the ability to add planted buffers along the water's edge so that residents won't see much but a forest. At the north end, it's 200 feet. And then as we come down the main drag and we turn left, heading west, going a little slow here. You can see the homes that would be adjacent to the proposed residential area. They never had a view of any golf course. It was always forest. And so we're suggesting, even though that policy doesn't apply, along London Drive, that we'll maintain a 100-foot buffer of all those natural trees. And that's the interesting part here. Our buffers maintain almost all the natural tree growth that's existing today, and we're willing to add trees and landscape and buffers to do that. So that's track one as we come down. That's our project. We think it accomplishes not only a community benefit, but it addresses the view shed issue that, as Ray said, is not real clear as to what it means. And so we're doing our best to make sure that those homes aren't adversely affected. So next slide. Track 2 is a large track. We're pretty much in agreement. Down at the bottom, we wanted to have a few lots there. It's about 380 feet wide. We're proposing a 25-foot buffer between those, back of those homes and the sides of ours. And I just draw to your attention, this was the area, one of the areas that we had offered to the city to give so that they could expand their stormwater projects in the area to help the flooding that periodically happens, and or make it a conservation easement or an environmental gopher tortoise sanctuary, bird sanctuary. And so that's not in your PUD unless we want to put it there, and we're willing to put it there. So that's track 2, because otherwise with staff's PUD, it just stays what it is and goes back to natural. This would be the conceptual layout of tract 2 on an aerial photograph, so you can kind of see what it looks like today. And you know, we have 50, 60, 80 acres of land that we could give to the city that they could expand their stormwater pond for volume. We've been through this with your stormwater department, and it wasn't until about a year later that they went into a different direction. So track 2 is that. Track 3 is the important one. This is the video that I sent to you all because it's important to understand what the reality on the ground is. I'm going to assert to you that there were only 3 homes on track 3 that had a view of the fairway at that time. And we know 3 of those homes were done because somebody put in pipes and tore down the trees on the golf course. So this was a drone footage that we took when we flew over, and we've overlaid a 100-foot buffer from the edge of their property line. And the important part that I draw to your attention is that the 100 feet is enormous. I mean, it goes to the next room. And 100 feet, as it is in the PUD that we want, will preserve almost all of the existing trees that are behind these individual house. Pause, please. Yeah, so you can see from this angle, that many of these homes look into the forest. Those 3 homes there had a view of the golf course. That is now, growing. Let's continue on. Where is that? So,
I'm going to agree. I think.
No,
nobody
sir.
here knows. Just
Stop,
please. You
please.
don't understand what he's showing.
okay, let's back up, that's fine.
Yeah, we're not gonna, please.
So if I had a pointer, thank you. This is it Lee Drive? Well, Lakeview is up at the top, but these are the homes on Lee Drive, is it? Yes. On Lee Drive. Just to give some perspective. But you can see the 100-foot buffer preserves all the existing trees that are in these individuals' backyards and that are on my client's property. So we're willing to preserve them, and had proposed to add additional undergrowth, whether it was ligustrums or wax myrtles, to increase opacity, which is a fancy word for making sure you can't see through. And we're ready to propose that, so we can continue. If you can see that these homes don't have a view of anything other than a forest. Again, all these trees will be preserved under our program. We can go to the next one, I think. These trees behind theirs, there'll be a 100-foot buffer behind their house equally. And then we're going to come fly back up north. And you can see, looking back at their homes along the old fairway, what their view is. It's of a forest. It's not of a defunct fairway. So our plan, despite staff in February pivoting and allowing us for a year or so to have development, say no development, this is what we want to propose to you all. This is where we want to place a community park. It's a 4-acre community park. We can use our impact fees to improve it, in addition to giving the land to the city so they don't have to purchase anything. We're proposing a single loaded road at the north end where it would be one way. It would be owned by the residents, and those lots would be at least 12,000 square feet. Homes would range from 2,800 to 5,000 square feet, so you can imagine what the values would be. That was one of the things that we heard from the community. Originally, as I showed you before, that was a double-loaded road with smaller lots. We went back and we changed it to be consistent with the adjacent properties. At the southern end, there's a double-loaded cul-de-sac of a couple hundred yards, and those people, again, will have a 100-foot natural vegetative buffer that we can provide. But it's important because this park is for the community that doesn't have a park. It is on that property because the city has an incredible trail system along that western edge of Lakeview Drive and the big, large ditch, drainage ditch that they have there. So the community can ride their bike and hop on their scooters and segways or whatever they are and go to the park. So that's track 3. So in order to help people understand what this project would look like on track 3, we're going to start from, let me come back here real quick. We're going to fly in from the project from the end of tract 6, head east, and then come down track 3, if that makes sense to you. City Council. Okay, so now we're coming down track 7. Here's the defunct golf course. It's overgrowing. We're proposing to leave the area that's in front of you, which is track 6. It is west of the existing waterway, to remain natural and go back into a forest. As you can see, pause please. One of the things we had proposed was there were cart paths all along the golf course. That could make for a nice amenity for the community, for bike paths to get to the park. That wasn't in staff's proposal. So as we come further west, we're coming down, and on the west side of the waterway, we're going to come into track 6, and you're going to see how our development lays out, not only on Tract 6, but takes a right and heads down the fairway that you saw, the defunct fairway, and how it lays out. Our proposal is that not only would we give you the land, but the stormwater pond that we would construct for our development on Tract 3 would accommodate all of your stormwater so that your 4 acres would be a pure 4 acres of use. That's the pond. If you can pause, please. One of the things that we proposed is that it was important to the residents was that, you know, I don't want a pond in the back of my house up to my property line, so we said that's fine. We are committed to keeping all the existing trees on that track and dig the pond in the area that was the fairway that is now overgrown with weeds and seedlings. So the individuals that would be on that track, their view wouldn't change. Their view wouldn't change at all. In fact, I'd argue that it might be enhanced because out of the back they'd see not only the forest but a lake. So this is the 4-acre park that we can work with you on. Again, I said we propose that our impact fees would be used to make the park improvements. So, you know, the city, that is the city's money, but the development that we are putting in this community in the L section would benefit the L section. Those impact fees would be used to benefit the L section and their residents. Continue, please. Yeah, perfect. So now we're going to take a right and head south along Tract 3. And this is our proposal with a single loaded road on our 12,000 square foot lots. They're about 60, 65 feet wide and 200 feet deep. The green line that you see is the same line that we saw in the previous video of a 100-foot buffer. And you can see all those trees would stay. So the residents along Lee Drive, out of the back of their houses, they're still going to see the forest. They're still going to see the forest. And so we come down there, it's single loaded. It would all be maintained by the HOA. There'd be 2 entrances onto Lakeview Drive so that it would minimize traffic impacts. We've lined it up with, I think it's Laramie there, and with the other cul-de-sac. So as you can see at the southern end, there was a proposed for a cul-de-sac. The property's a little bit wider. And that 100 feet at a minimum will be maintained. And those residents right there, if you pause, please. Those residents right there, along that, you can see their view will not change under our proposal. Okay? And again, I draw you back to what the code says. In our opinion, it's dealing with an active golf course about views, and fairways, and there are none of that anymore. So I hope you all get an opportunity to look at that. We can put that on our website for you. Let's go to the next slide. So that's Tract 3. Again, Tract 3, we're proposing the one on the left with the park and to provide the amenities for the community that are in our proposed PUD. Staff, as I remind you, for a year and a half or 14 months, talked about development on Tract 3, and then on 220, things pivoted. Tract 4 is quite simple. Really, the real issue with Tract 4 is that, much like on the previous track that we talked about, we need a stormwater pond. And so we have proposed in our PUD that the stormwater pond be located in the exact same fashion on Tract 6. None of the trees in these individuals' backyards will be disturbed, none of the undergrowth. The stormwater pond will go in the area that is the old existing fairway that is returning to trees and seedlings and weeds. That's Tract 4. You can kind of see it here from an aerial photograph. We're not going to touch any of the existing trees. Tract 5 is simple. That'll remain natural. That's what it looked like years ago. It's returning back to the forest. We've talked to residents there that presently mow out onto our property. We're fine with that. We're willing to work with the community on giving them easements over the golf course area. We're even interested in giving them the land if that's what they would like in order to expand their properties. Track 6 and 7 we talked about before. We have a little bit of a difference on how we want to put those lots. Tract 8, we're in agreement with. Planning Board agreed with us, kind of. We've made some clarifications on the adjustments, ground truthing of the wetlands and the conservation areas, and we're fine with that. This is the aerial and our property. There's an existing lake there, and we've talked to some of the residents that live on that lake. Historically, they have mowed down to the lake's edge, and we're fine with everything staying the status quo, so that all they'll see is a lake, and then behind the lake you can see there's a thick stand of trees. So those individuals, the views won't change. In Tract 9, we talked about with the Planning Board, and Tract 10, we're substantially similar. So as we get back to it, it's really about Tracts 3 and 1 and how we apply the land development code that we talked about, that talks about preserving fairway views, preserving the rear view that the people have. The rear view that most of the residents have that we've demonstrated to you are of forest and trees. That will stay the same. On Tract 1, we're talking about increasing buffers to 200, 250 feet. We're talking about adding stormwater ponds, lakes, essentially, that we know will enhance the values of properties up there. And so we'd like you to consider our proposal, which is the one you have in front of you today, and ask us any questions that you may have. I think that's the end of our presentation. It's been a little lengthier than I wanted to. We're available for questions. We have our traffic engineer here. We have Bob Dickinson, our land planner, and our architect, landscape architect, that can talk about buffers. And we thank you for your time today.
Well, Council, I'm going to open it up unless, staff, did you want to add anything to Mr. Shemento's comments?
No, we have nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. Council, I'm going to look to you for questions and comments at this time.
I do. I thought we were going to talk about it after the public, but I have a couple of questions. I think maybe Ray Tyner could answer this one. LDC section 03.04, parenthesis J, is it still in effect?
Yes, sir.
What confuses you about this? What is so hard to understand about this? Is there anything here that's not clear?
Yeah, I think it doesn't really define the view protection zone in the WIFs. The intent of the code that was inserted into our 2008 Land Development Code after the Golf Course Community District no longer existed was to provide for the best compatibility of the surrounding neighborhood. So, and it doesn't, besides the multifamily giving the 150-foot buffer, it doesn't really specify and define, you know, view sheds and you know, the specific standards. So it's hard. That's why we have it as a master plan development. So city staff and the applicant work together to try to determine what the best compatibility is and what those view sheds should be on the property to protect the existing residents.
So it's of no legal consequences if we bypass this for whatever reason, if we decide to bypass it in order to allow this to go. Just saying. It's of no legal consequences.
Well, if I could, Mr. Vice Mayor, what your staff has concluded is that there's portions of your land development code that this applicant must comply with, and that the staff must make sure that this development is consistent with. And those are identified in your staff report. And those are the standards in Land Development Code 2.0904, which are the general standards that apply to any request for any rezoning. That's number one. Number two, section 3.0, excuse me, that was 2.0505. That's the general standards. 2.0505, that's the 5 review criteria that we talked about earlier. That applies to any rezoning. 2.0904 are the criteria when you want to amend or create a master plan development. So that's an additional layer of criteria that we're required in our quasi-judicial capacity to analyze whether this application meets those standards. All of that is evaluated by your staff in the staff report. Lastly, staff has concluded that section 3.0304, subsection J, which is the one we're talking about, the Land Development Code, must be complied with. The question is, how do you apply it? That's the issue. Not whether it needs to be considered, but how you apply it. And the discussion you're hearing tonight between staff and what the PLDRB did and what the applicant is that they have different interpretations. This happens all the time. You can't create a code that can look into the future and identify every possible future application. That's why this body has the ability to exercise discretion and consistent with the requirements and the objectives in your land development code and your comprehensive plan, craft a solution for this vacant land that will comply with these sections in your land development code, including the objectives in 3.30304, which state that the development shall utilize the following guidelines, this is key, in order to minimize adverse impacts on any abutting single-family residentially zoned areas. That's the objective.
So you could understand my confusion. All right. The other question is, let's say this was approved. I think this is probably for the applicants. How many one-family homes and how many multifamily and the sizes, if you have any notion already?
Certainly, our preliminary layout on Tract 1 was 100, just how many? 170? Under our proposal. About 175 there, about 53 on Tract 3, and about 40 of townhouses on Tract 8. Does that answer your question?
40? Did you say 40 on Tract 8?
Let me clarify, please.
Sir, excuse me, sir, could you identify yourself for the record, please?
Alexander Yustilovsky, principal of Londonderry Dr, of course. We would like to minimize number of multifamily units in this development, minimize. And we can minimize that by creating more single-family home lots on a different parcels, on Tract 1 and 3. And that was pretty much the main idea why we insist to have development on parcel 3 and Tract 3, because we can, first of all, enlarge size of the lots itself and minimize number of multifamily, if any. It's a very good chance we're not going to have multifamilies at all, and that's exactly what we spell it out in MPD agreement. We propose both options, one family and multifamily townhouses. So.
For now, it's 43 multifamilies.
No, it says both. If, for example, we cannot, that's parcel.
Tract 8 is.
Tract 8.
Right, Tract 8.
Tract 8, it says both ways. It could be single-family homes or multifamily.
Basically, your code dictates how many units per acre there could be on that, whether they can fit or not, Mr. Branquino.
So that was my questions for now.
Absolutely. Thank you to staff and for the applicant for their presentations. I had a question. Did we ever address why exactly there would be a problem with, did I hear that there's going to be ponds on Tract 1 and Tract 3, that was no longer a viable solution or something along those lines earlier in staff's presentation?
I'm sorry, I'm having a real hard time hearing that question. I'm sorry.
On Tract 1 and Tract 3, was there a pond that was between both tracks? That was connected between both tracks, 1 and 3? No? No. Okay, excellent, then I misheard. The second part is qualifications for willingness to add intermediary trees like the wax myrtles like we talked about. Do you have any idea on how applicable that would be? Who would be able to request additional wax myrtles? I know from experience that you can pretty much make things with zero opacity through woods with wax myrtles.
Correct, and those are things that staff has done in the past. We've done in PUDs where we design a buffer with what we call, 50%, 80% opacity, and we plant trees, and then we plant underbrush with, I don't want to say xeriscape, but Florida species, so that it just basically goes back to natural and there's very little maintenance. That's our intent.
And then a question for Mr. Reichman. Is it arguable, and this is what gives me trepidation, is the Land Development Code, Section 030304, the first part that says existing golf course communities. Is it our interpretation that even though the golf course is no longer open, is it still a golf course community? And is that how we apply our codes across the board, where that verbiage, existing golf course community, to me, means where there is a golf course that is in operation? And how does that dictate the application or the applicability of this Land Development Code? I know you said earlier the main part is, in addition, the development shall utilize the following guidelines in order to minimize adverse impacts on any abutting single-family residentially zoned areas. But is that void because of the preceding sentences where it says existing golf course communities, and is that arguable in court? How does that work?
Well, I will tell you the staff has interpreted this consistently, that this section applies to communities that were designed and constructed and owned and operated as a community that had a golf course in it. And the staff, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but staff has consistently interpreted that this section 30304J continues to apply, notwithstanding if the golf course is not operated a golf course. Because it says, and I will defer to them as far as their rationale, but the way I would understand it, it doesn't say existing golf courses, it says existing golf course communities. And again, I'll stand corrected, but that's my understanding of the staff's interpretation of the application of this section to the communities in the city of Palm Coast that were developed to have a golf course in them. They were golf course communities, and they still exist.
And it also says formal golf course community, which this property in the area was part of a formal golf course community.
District.
May I respond, Mr. Clifford?
Absolutely.
I think we generally agree that this area was always intended to be looked at with a deeper conscious of preserving people's values, obviously, no adverse impact. But I don't believe that it anticipates what would happen if a golf course community, whether it was 1 year or 25 years, if this golf course, which is now defunct, what happens? Because the next sentences talk about fairways, the use of fairways. And, our opinion is that there's no fairways, there's woods. And it talks about existing views. Is that existing views at the time of development? Or is that existing views back in 1984? Existing views in 2000? I mean, it's just, as Ray said in the planning board meeting, it's, not as clear as we would like to have it, because you have another section when you have multifamily, it's 150 feet. It's clearly defined as to what is reasonable. So we don't suggest that the section doesn't apply at all. We recognize that it was always intended to help that community preserve its values and avoid adverse impacts.
Excellent. And any exact details on the willingness to work with the neighbors for easement adjustments so they continue to mow back onto the property of the applicant? Just in general, was that
We're fine. We're fine. We can put it in there. There are some details that obviously would have to be looked at. Those properties, tracts, would be owned by an HOA, which would have a liability policy. But the concept is perfectly fine with us. We've talked about giving them lands or deeding them, but it requires very sophisticated platting issues. But these are all issues that we were willing to discuss.
understood? That's all I have. Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
And again, we'll have more opportunity to ask further questions once we hear from the public as well. So, Councilmember Barbosa, do you have anything at this time?
Yes, on track 9, what's the setback? The 50-foot buffer, is that?
That's 100. The planning board asked for 100 there on track 9 against what I'll call quasi-commercial with your institutional. But on track 3, they didn't like our 100 when it abuts to residential homes. So it's 100 on track 9.
And on track 1 and 3, the size of the lots are going to be?
On tract 3, they will be the same size as the adjacent lot, so it's 10,000 square feet in land development code.
It's a SFR2 zoning, adjacent lots, and we are doing SFR2, the same criteria. Each lot may vary a little bit, but typically 60 by 200, so it's 12,000 square feet versus most of the lots adjacent between 9 to 11,000 square feet. So
What about on track 1?
on track 1, it's SFR1, which again, city staff agreed with us to have SFR1, which is again similar with several developments in the L section, which is Matanzas Lakes, I believe, and another proposed development, also SFR1, which is
Consistent with your code.
consistent with the code.
We don't have the exact size of the lots? Or?
Again,
There's a-
because of the shape, it says minimum 50 feet.
No, 60.
It's 6,000.
Square feet.
6,000 with a
6,000
50-foot minimum width.
But again, because of the shape of the proposed development, it's most likely it's going to be longer rather than wider. So total square footage probably, I would say, from 6 to 10,000 square feet.
I guess this question would be for the stormwater. Why didn't they want the track 2 for more stormwater?
I mean, we had some meetings with our stormwater folks. I mean, they're here to speak too, with the applicant. And it was not a capacity issue. The areas that we were looking at would not, at that time, be advantageous to what their plans were.
The reason?
I would like to,
That answer, for now, that concludes
Well,
your question?
there was no clear reason why they didn't want it.
Those are the tracks I mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, they had indicated to us that, you know, it wasn't so much of a capacity issue with Mr. Peel, but with stormwater staff. So we did attempt and with Mr. Cimento to look at potential, but.
Mayor, City Council, I'll just add that we were going to lose control. The developer was asking for 5 years of digging rights for those, and that may be a parcel that may be important to the city in the future, but having control and being able to manage that program ourselves rather than being at the mercy of the developer was found to be more important at the time.
There was also, whatever happened to the original staff recommendation? Do we have the pictures of that, or?
No, our recommendation went to the planning board, and then we bring the city council the planning board recommendation. So the planning board went with, you know, staff's recommendation on a lot of the tracks, and I think track 9, they changed it up a little bit. But what you're hearing tonight and what we're illustrating for you is the planning board recommendation.
On track 3, I was a little worried that cars were backing up, but I see you guys changed that and put a street. That sounds pretty good. All right, that's it.
Councilmember?
Most of my questions were answered. Thank you, Jason, answered one of them. But I am confused about the park. I understand that Mr. Cimento and your client are offering a park, and I just want to know, why would staff be opposed to a park, or are you not?
No, sir, we're not opposed to a park. We had those discussions before, and the park came back as far as this revision goes. But we had discussed the park in the past.
In Mr. Cimento's revision, right? But
Yeah,
it's
the
not on
recent
yours,
revision.
though, is it?
No, it wasn't part of
That'd be
the planning
something
board.
you'd be willing to include? That staff would agree to?
Yeah, I think we can look at the language as far as the park. I think the way the language was proposed is that they would collect park impact fees, and then those park impact fees would be set aside in a fund and then accumulate, you know, they have to pay park impact fees anyway, and then that would go to make those improvements to the park. So I think we can have further discussions with the applicant. Maybe they construct it first, and then we collect and then as the houses come along, that maybe, one of the options would be that, once the houses are built, they'll get impact fee credit for that. So there's some language that we can work with for that. But I had just seen the language actually fresh yesterday. So.
Sure, thanks. That's it.
And I have nothing at this time. I'm going to ask, this is how I'd like public speaking to go, because I want to make sure we're respectful of everyone's time, but safe because of COVID restrictions. Each resident will have up to 3 minutes. We're going to ask you to please state your name clearly for the record. We stick to those 3 minutes, so once those 3 minutes are up, your comments are concluded. If you could line up but separate a bit, I see everyone's wearing their mask, thank you, up above their nose. Again, this is issues relevant to the topic tonight. And so if each speaker, and then Brad, if you can maybe manage them to make sure they're separating enough, and line up, so after the first speaker is concluded, the next one can come right up. So first speaker. And again, I'm going to ask everyone to please be respectful. So we're not going to be, yelling out. We're not going to be applauding. We're here to listen to the residents of Palm Coast, and that's really important that we can really listen. So please, first speaker.
Hello, are you Michael Arnold? I identify myself. I'm a Palm Coast resident as well as investment advisor. A couple things I wanted to bring up. So when you said, Mr. Chimento mentioned it's a 100-foot buffer, is that a 100-foot buffer to the property lines, or is that a 100-foot buffer between the structures? I think that's kind of would be something that would be more clearly defined because there's property lines associated, so on and so forth. And the impact fees used, that could be considered a rebate. So using the impact fees in order to offset the cost of building a park, wouldn't that be considered rebating those impact fees at the city's costs? So if a park is going to be given at what cost to the investors, to the citizens who are investing the money every year in that, and respectfully would request for us not to rebate such building and development. Another thing I wanted to mention was in relation to a surety bond. If I can get Mr. Chimento's draft up here, it showed that between the years of 2007 and 2016, that the city was locked up in legal. And I'm not sure if you guys know, but everybody here is pretty much familiar. Legal fees and expenses can tie up pretty heavy, well into the figures expected for us to recover from anything. A surety bond does protect up to a certain expense, but it's actually the hardest to recover losses, as it does require legal. It's difficult for the insurance company to be willing to confirm the loss, as most insurance companies don't ever want to confirm and pay out. The surety bond is the surety bond, would that be used for the project as whole, or per unit that's being built, or per section that's being built? Because that also determines the value of the premiums and the length of the project. If the surety bond is something that they want to use on top of another suggestion that I have mentioned before, would those premiums for future valuations be held in escrow for the purposes of protecting the city and the city's losses moving forward? So if they're going to do it per project and per section, then the surety bond, the premiums used for that, would that be willing to held in escrow so that the city doesn't have to end up locking up in a legal agreement? There are other alternatives, such as a letter of credit coming from a financial institution, any type of a reputable bank. Banks include, Wells Fargo we'll use. So the letter of credit would confirm that the individual has the buying and lending power in order to confirm that he could complete the project, and that those monies are normally held in safekeeping at any financial institution. And the other one is the proof of funds. Proof of funds can come as a form of a bank statement or something like that, showing that the individual can actually afford to cut the check for this project. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And all questions will be answered following all public speaking. So I would ask the applicant, if they're relative to you, to please take notes on those questions so we make sure the residents have answers, and staff, if it's relevant to that, please take notes. Thank you.
My name is Mike Martin. I live on Lake Success Drive, and I'm here speaking for some of my neighbors who couldn't come. The proposed development violates the established rights of homeowners living in our neighborhood. Your land development code, which you've all talked about, clearly states that existing rear yard views shall be maintained. That's pretty definitive. Shall doesn't mean may, shall means must. And Jason DiLorenzo, back in June when he made public comments on it, said that he recognized our legal right to have a line of sight, and he took the most conservative view, which was the entire width of the fairway. Now, you can argue about when these views should be considered, but even if you take the most extreme view that the view should be established when Mr. Ustilovsky bought the property, when he bought the property, the fairways were still fairways, and in my case, the 18th fairway, the fairway is still a fairway. There are no trees growing on it, and no trees will grow on it unless he plants a ton of trees. And what you'll have on Tract 3 are 8-foot weeds, not trees. There is no forest, and there will be no forest. We, the residents, have retained legal counsel, and we are fully prepared to file a class action lawsuit against the city if you violate our established rights under the land code. We also have restrictive covenants that were registered by IT&T concerning the golf course, because IT&T did not ever expect to have the golf course developed. And if we have to go to court, we will produce these covenants, and we will ask the court to uphold them and restrict them. And I want to say that we will not allow you to infringe on our rights. We will not allow you to take away our home equity, as building 6,000 square foot lots would harm our property values. And we will not allow you to infringe upon our health or safety, because we will not sit down and take any building until we are absolutely positive there is no arsenic contamination. And I also want to say that we expect you, our elected leaders, to primarily respect and take our property values, our health, and the existing community into consideration. And as far as Mr. Ustilovsky and Mr. Chimento's comments that it's a win-win situation, I can tell you that most of my neighbors see absolutely nothing positive in this development for the established community. And the only 6,000 square foot lots that exist are in Matanzas Lakes, which is a whole separate community that does not infringe or abut upon any existing properties. On Tract 1, every single property that abuts the golf course is a minimum of 10,000 feet. And if you allow 6,000 square foot lots to be placed across from these, you are damaging our home values. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Robert King, good evening. Robert King, 22 Lewisburg Lane. I'd like to reiterate the chapter 3.03.4J. I know we've talked about it. I believe in it. I believe that it was instituted for a reason. And I'd like to also redirect to Tract 3 along Lakeview. This is being proposed for development. The attorney presented a drone video at PLDRB and also here of the homes along this stretch, and it's being targeted for development. This claim is that they don't have a line of sight, a view on the fairway, as I understand it, but due to a natural buffer of trees. The problem is that the video was taken at an elevated and not at ground level. I presented pictures to you that you can look at. I ride my bike every morning. I didn't even think about it until he brought it up, and I saw it at the PLDRB meeting, and I saw the video, and I said, well, I want to take a look on Lakeview, and I just want to see what the neighbors are going to see when they're there, when they start development. Sure enough, those are pines, those are cypress trees. They can see right through it. They're going to have a beautiful view when they start developing. Let me tell you that right now.
Provide a copy of those pictures to the applicant.
I gave it to Virginia. Brad did.
If you could provide a copy just for purposes of equity and fairness to the applicant, please. Okay. Sorry.
I'd also like to talk about justification and modifying the revisement and revising the MPD. Is there a need? Let's go to square one. Is there a need? As I understand it, the MPD should not allow for development on this current green belt designated property. I may have this misunderstood. I'm just a common man. That's how I understand it. It was a green belt. Now we're going to revise it. Again, what is the intent? Okay? The development needs to be justified for any type of revision. And my opinion is that justification is absent. It's absent. There's no reason for development. What do we want? Do we want more homes? Is there a need for more homes? Or is there a need for green belt? Is there a need for recreation, well-being? You know, to me, it's a very simple concept. Okay? I'm sorry, I'm very nervous. I'd also like to refer to Tract 1 and the proposed development there as well. They want to use the driving range that was there at one time. I'm not a golfer, but I would like to see it remain a golf course. Okay, I'm sorry.
Sir, that's okay, but thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Pete Kennedy. I live at 19 Lake Success Drive. Mr. Martin is a neighbor of mine, possibly 5 houses to the south of me. And Mr. Martin does not speak for myself at 19 Lake Success Drive, nor does he speak for 21, 23, 25, or 27 Lake Success Drive. All 5 of those houses face directly onto the 18th hole, and we enjoy the view shed that is there currently. And I'm very pleased to see how the city and the developer are working together to try to get what is the best development that's going to go in, that's going to be workable for everybody. If I could see Tract 1, is there a chance for me to see Tract 1 with the side-by-side? I just want to make one comment that we talk about view sheds a lot and the size of the buffer, but I also think we should be talking about the quality of the buffer. And as I recall, the 2 proposals for Tract 1, the developer is proposing increasing the water body that's currently there. City of Palm Coast does not want to do that. I don't know anybody who would not want to view water. I've been on my property there since 2008, and there's nothing more beautiful than for me and my neighbors to look out at that lake that's there. So when we talk about the buffer, I don't know why the city of Palm Coast would be opposed to what the developer is proposing for that elongated lake. And, you know, I mean, development is inevitable. I used to once sit in your seats in a town up in New York, and I believe that development properly zoned and managed by the municipality is good development. You can't change it. It's going to happen. But I just want to thank the city of Palm Coast for doing a good job in managing it. And I would like some reconsideration to look at Tract 1 and the elongated lake. I think, who doesn't want waterfront property? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Robert McDonald, Palm Coast. I just have a real quick question. The previous owner of the property, according to the graphics, owed the city approximately $700,000. We're not going to quibble about a few dollars one way or the other. But my only question is, how much of that $700,000 or whatever the previous owner owed the city, how much of that money was recouped by the city? Was it the full amount? Was it close? Because that's really what it's all about. Now, as far as the residents that are here to either make good comments or bad comments about the project, if this was in my neighborhood, we'd have hundreds, if not thousands of people standing here waiting to get in. I look around this room. There are 50, 60 people here. But my biggest issue is the money. Because all of us in this room work very hard for their money. Very hard. I know I do. And if somebody owed me money, I don't care if they owed me a nickel. I want my nickel. So the city, before they go and give permission to the builder or the developer, make sure, please, that you get every nickel that we're supposed to have. That's all he asks. Just make sure that they give you every nickel that they owe you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker. Brad, can you make sure?
I'd like to present my presentation to
Brad,
Virginia.
can you make sure people are coming up?
I only made it up for just the city council. There's 5 copies there. My name's Susan Sheverdecker. I live at 145 London Drive. You will see on page 1 first, the map. As you can see on the left side of this map, you have all from 117 to 163 is all those homes facing, and they do touch the fairway 4. If you go to 165 to 189 on London, there is no homes built there. That is what the city had proposed, that institution of 8.3 to be up at that end. You can look at my drawing and you can see what's going on. If you turn page 2, you will see that what the Flagler PA has stated, the zoning, okay? 3.41 is the section. If you go, I get really nervous when I talk. If you go to page 3 and 4, you will see photos. That is what the fairway actually looks like on fairway 4. If you go to page 5, you will also see photos. Those are alligators, okay? They are federally endangered, along with the Florida Endangered and Threatened Law. You also will have those birds. That is a 1918, okay? That is a United States migrating bird. They are federally protected by 4 other countries in the world. It's Japan, Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Those are pictures of those birds that actually live on Fairway 4 that you just saw those photos. The legal documentations on application 4150, it needs to be changed on track 9. You will see everything for the past year and a half has stated HOA, POA. I don't have time to discuss what it is. I wrote it for you to read. The Constitution of Florida Stat 720 says this is not permitted. It needs to be changed off of track 9. Also, November 18th, Planning and Zoning Board said the 3 acres could be moved anywhere with a 900-foot barrier, 35 feet height. Okay, and the arsenic? Well, where's the arsenic completely? All over the whole golf course? If you go back to the very beginning on page 2, you will see that, blah, 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 blah. See, I messed up. But anyways, you'll see the difference of what is being proposed after the planning and zoning, because actually, Bill Hoover and Ray Tyner, your city planners, have done a fantastic job. If I have to compromise, which I don't want anything built on the fairways, I would like the city, as these 2 gentlemen have done a fantastic for a year and a half, compromising to figure out a way for track 9. Track 9 should not be what planning and zoning proposed on November 18th, if you look at my documents. Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Janice Bland. I live along Leidel Drive, which abuts track 3. I'm going to be very brief. I'd like to point out that home construction is ongoing on existing lots in the L section by established builders, with new homes in keeping with the design of existing homes. In fact, it appears that vacant lot development is accelerating, yet there are many, many rentals in the L section. This suggests to me that there is not such a demand for home sales that would warrant the number of homes the developer wants to build on tracks 1 and 3. And thank you for the overview of the proposed flyover of track 3, 60-foot lots. What an eyesore. Instead of a proposed 4-acre park, How about developing Tract 3 for the entire thing for recreation and/or a nature preserve? My point is, the developer's rights should not trump our rights to have quality of life, which includes being free of years of construction traffic, being free from possible airborne toxins, and maintaining our property values. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Hello, my name is Mike Wierspa. I live at 17 Lake Success Place. On the map up here, I'd be at that 200 BPZ. So I'm at the nearest part there. I sent you a letter, and I'm glad you put it into the public comments, so I guess I can talk about it here. Yes. And one of those was a picture of our fairway that when we moved there just 2 years ago. We bought the house in January 2019. At that point, what we heard was that the city had fined the previous owner, or the current owner, for not maintaining the fairways. And the fairway that we looked at and around the neighborhood were all being maintained maybe by current neighbor owners. Maybe the city was mowing it, I'm not sure of that. But it was being maintained as a fairway, and that is what we purchased. We would like to see that zone protection, view protection maintained by the city. And I think the neighbors there are willing to maintain it with you. If we had not, we were wondering why was it not being maintained after the current owner had purchased it. And if there was a secret agreement that was made between the city and them, nobody knew about it, and that is not fair to anybody. And I guess several months ago, we found out that the city had kind of condoned that it was going to go to a natural state. And that's the first anybody in our neighborhood had heard of that. Going back to some of the other things I put in the letter, which has been mentioned here, is the current arsenic testing has been inadequate. From the last meeting at the planning board, we learned that the owner did discover arsenic on the site after testing just 6 inches to a foot down. On a development, more land than that is going to be disturbed. They're going to go down more than a foot. This needs to go down 3 feet, 6 feet to wherever they're going to be disturbing the ground to see if there's arsenic there before any building is done. The last point is, and I hate to bring this one up, it was also in the letter at where tracks 1 and 2 come together. The owner had cut down 5 trees 3 weeks ago. The remains of those trees are still on the land. It is an eyesore, it is a hazard, and should be rectified. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Good evening. Toby Tobin from Palm Coast. I consult to builders and developers, including Mr. Uslowski, but I'm speaking tonight as a citizen. The Land Development Code does not adequately prescribe a view-protected zone. This is clearly a defective ordinance with way too much room for interpretation. Uncertainty is the crabgrass in the lawn of development. The staff reports it admits that it is clear that new development does not need to be completely out of view and may be visible from existing properties. Apparently, a view-protected zone does not have any relationship to what you can actually see from a resident's backyard. According to the staff position on Parcel 1, a view-protected zone can extend from a residential rear lot line across the former fairway, now committed to nature, through 100 feet of pre-existing woods and across another former fairway for a distance of up to 650 feet. On Parcel 3, the staff-defined view-protected zone extends from rear lot lines through several feet of developer-owned woods across the former fairway, to which, apart from a few homes, no line of sight currently exists. Whatever decision is made tonight, and I support the developer's plan. I think it's reasonable. I think it's well thought out and responsible. But it should be, your decision should include a clear direction to staff to bring forward a more tightly defined view protected zone. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Jim Covington, and I want to thank everybody for coming and trying to have this this civic effect. And I wanted to just mention that just to plant the seed of seeing a larger view of this impact of the decisions that are made, where this city sits in a global perspective next to the 500-year-old city that's the landmark claim to this great country that's the greatest country in the world, and that this side of town is the side that is adjacent to that, and that is probably certainly going to outlive all of us. So just to consider the long-term importance of and the value of this area, especially in approving any kind of development. But you know, and as a challenge to the developer too, that they don't need to sell their property short of its long-term value, and what the potential is for that. It is inevitable, I think, that it won't be a golf course, but I just hope that we'll take this as an encouragement of what the potential could be. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Hello, I'm David Flynn, Track 8. I feel like a broken record because my neighbors, they couldn't be here for health reasons, and we discuss these things often, and they hear things from other people, so I'm trying to relay some messages here, and I believe Mr. Schmenta said the property from our property to the pond we've been maintaining, even though it's not ours, for quite a few years, for myself over 20 years, and we were just curious if that's still safe and everything like that to there, as well as the tree line across the pond, which is, he actually answered that for us. I was curious because the Track 1 and 3, I think, had the development of where these the houses are going to be. Track 8 didn't really exactly show us exactly where these structures will be, or if they have an idea where they will be. I was curious about that. And my neighbors talked to me the other day, and they said that Alex, I don't know if he's the owner, developer, they were talking about potentially selling Track 8. Is that up in the air? Should be for sale to another developer or anything like that? I'm just relaying messages I heard. I hate doing it, but I was just curious. And that's about it. Yeah, I was just curious about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I'm Christine Williams, and I live on 137 London Drive, which is Track 9. And Susie addressed this a little bit, but I want to point out that the golf course pond and surrounding area provide homes to identified, protected, and endangered species. Now, I'm not an expert in that realm, but I do know that alligators, snowy egrets, gopher turtles, and swallowtail butterflies are 4 kinds of wildlife living there and have been there for quite some time. And I've lived there since 2005 when it was an active golf course. By law, they are not to be disturbed from their natural habitat. In the past 3 days, I have seen 5 to 8 foot gators behind my home sunning and stalking birds. Also, many of us have seen bald eagles in the trees and flying above, although I'm not aware that any eagle nests that are there, and which would absolutely protect them. What other protected and endangered species might be there, we don't know. Has anyone looked into the kinds of wildlife living in our neighborhood? Have any studies been done? It's imperative that the City Council finds out before approving any proposed development specifically in this area. Please look at these laws and disallow any disruption or building that incorporates the pond and adjacent areas. Now, that's my presentation, but very quickly, when Tract 9 was put up on the screen, I didn't see the existing pond. I wonder what happened to that. Is that still there? Is that going to be filled in? Like the gentleman before me said, we enjoy looking at that pond. I hope that's going to be retained. And the other thing that concerns me, as well as was mentioned earlier, is the depth of the arsenic testing. I understood, too, that it had to go down more than 6 to 12 inches. And I think it has to go more than just where the clubhouse shed was. I think it needs to go throughout the area where development's going to be proposed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Thank you. Perry Matrano, 207 London Drive. Thank you, Mayor, Council, for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to compliment your staff. Incredible job that these guys have done. Everyone has done a really great job, and the planning board. We have a great planning board. These folks did their job. They asked a lot of questions. They made a recommendation. Recommendation followed up from your staff. And we come here today, and it's the same presentation that was done in December of 2019. It's the same thing. It just looks different. Presented nicely. Very pretty. Super. Had to hire a company out of Canada to show the same thing. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, we got smaller lots, houses jammed together. It doesn't look right. It don't belong here. It's a bad project. It's a really bad project. There can be some improvement. The recommendation from the planning board for 1, 3, and 9. Maybe that's the way it's got to be. I don't know. Maybe some changes. But at the end of the day, why have the planning board? Why have your staff work so hard and listen to all our comments? Everyone believed in the system. We came to the meetings, the hearings, the requirements. We spoke. Everyone listened. We're here now. The decision that has to be made is important to the fact that, yes, he's made an investment, so have I. But what has to be done is something that is going to make some sense of what the planning board has done.
Sorry, I can't. Go ahead.
Okay. On that note, 1, 3, and 9, as discussed by the planning board, is probably the better direction that we could possibly go. Number 9 needs a real vamping over there. I mean, these folks that came up with the environmental issue of the gators, the birds, and all the other things that are over there, I'm an environmentalist. I believe in it. You've got to protect them. So we need, for your decision, to be predicated on those facts and not the dog and pony show. Don't mean to be disrespectful, but it's just that's the way it is. It really needs to be what was presented, what was heard, what was tabled and brought back for further discussion that they didn't bring. They brought it today. It's the same discussion in December of 2019. So please make your decision. But remember, your planning board gave you the lead. Thank you, fellas. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Good evening, Happy New Year. George Mayo, Palm Coast. Just quickly, I don't know who made the graphics, say as in section 1. As somebody complained earlier, and I've seen in other projects and going forward, can the font for the street names or other points of interest be made darker? Because as somebody hollered out, I can't see what you're talking about. You can't read this. I'm sitting 6 feet away from the screen and I can't read the street names. They're the same color as the dividing lines for the property. So if you can make it more accessible, easily readable, people would understand easier. One other thing is, I guess it's code 3.03, whatever was mentioned for golf course community. The only thinking I have, if it's no longer a golf course, and the city has said for years it's not going to be a golf course, how can you consider it a golf course community if it's no longer a golf course? Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
My name is Doug Ziegler. I live up on Lee Drive. To echo what that gentleman just said, sorry if I outburst, but I couldn't make hide nor hair of even the street names of the projects you're presenting to us. I know there's maps. I know there's proposals. Can we go online and get them? Can we find them somewhere? It was kind of a waste of time to come here because I really got no information from the flyovers and the street names that I couldn't understand. District 9, Lot 1, give me some street names, give me some geography, I think would be better. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker. We're not doing that, sir.
My name is James O'Connor, and thanks for hearing me tonight, and thanks for being here. I live in the L section, and I'm up at the northeast corner of it in Lake Place, all the way down in the cul-de-sac. And I agree with the gentleman who just here before me. I could only understand the street names and everything else. Sometimes I couldn't tell, where I lived or where I was as far as the maps are concerned. So thought I could have done a better job on that. But whatever they want to do up there, I noticed that in a couple of sections, you had houses on top of one another. That's the way it seemed to me. They were like shadows on the screen, but they were like one house on top of one another, like there was no room. Like I could look out a bedroom window and see the guy in the bathroom next door. That's how close they seemed to be to me. It's just unsightly, because like one up US 1, if you take a look at all of the new development going on north of Matanzaswood Parkway on the west side of US 1, the houses in the back over there that they're building them so close together. My wife and I looked at that the other day and said, who would want to live in a place like this? Who wants to live there with a house on top of one another where there's no room and your neighbors are just squeezing you right in? Anyway, that's how I saw it. This was my visibility. My wife said the same thing. So that part of that proposal that they're making tonight, I wish they'd just keep the lots as a bigger size and keep the houses away from one another. I think, it would be a better deal for the city. So thanks for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Joe. I live at 135 London Drive. And right now, my view is the pond. I still don't really understand if that's going away or not. Right, is the pond going away?
They'll answer after your questions are done.
I'm sorry?
After your questions are done, you'll get all your answers.
Tonight?
Yes.
Tonight?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Is that your
The
only
other thing
question?
is,
Yeah.
commercial, whatever, it's going to be buildings behind me. I'm pretty much understanding. Am I going to be seeing the back of the buildings? Because that's where like all the dumpsters and things go. I'm just not sure. And then the 100-foot, the buffer, green space, what are they planning on putting there? Those are questions. So I have to stick around
yeah.
to get answers to those?
Your answers
Melissa,
will be,
it's a very, I understand, but.
your answers will be immediately answered following public comments, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fine.
Yes.
Yeah, the other thing I just want you, it's a big investment for me, right? My house, it's like your biggest investment. So it just seems like that parcel at 9, I believe, is it 9? With everybody else seems to be getting in, and I appreciate all the concerns here, and they're all concerned for their own property. But they're getting lakes behind them and all this nice, stuff. I'm getting commercial property behind me. The way I'm looking at that, it looks like the pond's going. There's not a lot of room between my house and US 1. So 100 feet, it's really nothing. When and again, green space, depending what it is. And I know what goes behind commercial property. It's not very pretty. I don't really want to look at a block stuccoed wall. That's not very pretty either. And personally, I think I have a very nice view right now. And the other comment is that section parentheses J, I'm not sure in all the, it said that if you live on the golf course and there's a pond behind you, that they, reading that they couldn't do anything there. So that's the other question. I don't know, is that changing? Is that the subject to interpretation thing that they're discussing here? I don't understand all that part. So those are just some questions.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis Shiverdecker, live on London Drive, 145. Just want to touch base with you on a couple of issues. The first one is property tax. I just paid my property tax, and according to my invoice, it says Matanzas Woods Golf Course. So as a golf course community, I paid that there. And the second issue is, I've noticed we talked about the developer did a study on the poisoning down on the golf course, and it's been my opinion is when you pay somebody, you're going to get the results you want. So I challenge the commission to do an independent study on the poison and the chemicals in the golf course. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Joanne Knepp, and I live on Lake Success Drive, close to Laramie. When my husband and I moved here in 2015, we purchased our property with the understanding from the realtor who presented the property to us that you don't have to worry about that fairway back there because they can't build back there. That is designated green space. They can't change it ever. That was a major factor in buying our home. What I'm concerned about is the developer putting 6,000-foot lots behind there. What I'm concerned about is we have driven past his American Village, which are 6,000 square foot lots. I'm sorry, but your homes there are very, very unattractive. They do not coincide with the homes that are on Lake Success Drive right now. And I really fear that my home will drop in value considerably with houses that look like that, okay? I am not against him building, but please put 10,000 square foot lots just like the rest of us and have a community like ours. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, Diana Minotti, 207 London Drive. We bought our property in 2005. It was empty. We built it. We lived there. We've lived through much of this. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but yes, Matanzas Woods has been the forgotten subdivision for many, many years. We used to have a sign that said Matanzas Woods at the corner of Belterre and Lakeview. That went away. We were promised to get another one, never got it. We were promised a park, never got it. We had the most beautiful golf course. It left us. Unfortunately, when it was supposed to be redone, it got pushed aside, so Cypress Knolls got done, and we never reopened. And it's sad. The only thing we have right now that even resembles a golf course is the entryway on Lakeview. And we asked for lighting, we asked for sidewalks, and we didn't get it until my babysitter died. She was hit by a car on that land. There was a memorial to this day that people put flowers. I've put the G clef. She was in band with my son. And I think that the overall feeling, and I don't know about everybody else, but when I drive up Lakeview, that is a memorial. That is, I'm home, I feel like I've left the city and I'm coming into a neighborhood, a community. And for the sidewalk, it was discussed initially, it was going to be broken up with all those driveways. Then now you've made one road coming in. Okay, that's nice, but now we're not going to see the beautiful pasture. We're going to see houses, little houses, which there's plenty of it on US 1. There's going to be plenty of development on Matanzas Woods Parkway and up and down Belterre. So really, what is the need? I've heard that by other people, and it's true. What is the need when we have development already scheduled and happening above Old Kings Road on US 1, all the way down to Palm Coast Parkway, and another community going to be opening up by Whiteview. How many houses do we need? And where do we find the beauty that we bought into? I bought into a golf course community. I paid $80,000 for my lot. So I bought into a golf course community. And I think it needs to remain that way. And I don't think there is a need for all this housing. And the real part of the need is we're talking about views. What good is the view if we're dead after all this arsenic is dug up?
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Celia Buglisi, and I do not live in Matanzas Golf Course, but I live by the Palm Harbor Golf Course. I am here in support of all these neighbors. I used to live many years ago in the area of the Matanzas woods, and I used to go bicycling around the golf course. It was beautiful. These people bought on a golf course, and it's in your hands only to save the value of their home, their quality of life, and they not to get sick, because many of them people are sick. That's why they didn't come to the meeting today. That's why Leanne couldn't be here to speak. And that's why 2 or 3 more neighbors couldn't come. So really, I'm sorry for being emotional, but you have the key for the quality of life of all of the people of Palm Coast. I would say this, in our charter, I remember, because I voted to become a city in 1999. I live here since 1991. I voted to be a city, and I remember there is a section of the charter that I should have brought with me and read to you today, on which reads that every development presented to the city officials should consider first the existing residents' quality of life and safety. So you, in your hands, have that. This land was bought for $700,000, and that was the money that was owed to the city. The city should have kept it and keep the green belt and turn it into a preserve and into walkways using the original golf carts ways, and to preserve the greenery of these people. It's like Mr. King says, it's true. If you drive by there, the videos were taken from above. There are just weeds. Why there are weeds there? Because when this gentleman bought it, they stopped maintaining the golf course. To me, probably was intentional, was the way to achieve what we have today. This is what I say, and this is what I see it. I'm here since 1991, and I remember the beauty of the golf course. When my friends played in that golf course, they bought in the golf course to play on it. So it's not just few of us, all the people that couldn't come to, we have been coming to all these meetings. I don't live there, but I feel for them. That's all I can say. Please keep our residents in mind first. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Mayor, there are several callers.
We will take the first one first.
Just as a reminder, if you've called into the meeting, please hit *9 on your phone to indicate you would like to speak. You'll hear a message that you are unmuted. You may begin speaking. You'll have 3 minutes. Please state your name for the record. You'll hear 2 beeps when you have 15 seconds left, and a final beep when your 3 minutes are up.
Hi, yes, this is Leanne Pennington from Lake Success Drive. I'm upset that Mr. Chimento doesn't believe that this isn't a public partnership when it involves our backyard, our home's equity, and our health with the stirring of the arsenic-laden soil. The land code applies to existing golf course communities. Basic grammar school would teach you that the adjective existing applies to the word communities and not to the word golf course. It does not need to be an active course in order for the land code to be applied. Palm Coast 4 sister golf courses were designed and sold as green space amenities. People bought into these properties with the expectation of green space in their backyard, not necessarily a golf course, but the right to the privacy it affords. The city planners worked exceptionally well to define our rights, as they are keenly aware that these apply to the sister courses, courses that may not exist in the near future given the downturn in the golf industry. Their support of these rights ensure that Cypress Knolls, Palms Harbor, and Pine Lakes will not suffer to a developer's greed at the expense of the residents' equity. This hearing's outcome sets a precedent for the E, W, and C section. You will not be able to walk back your findings back for these residents. We are grateful to the city for respecting our landowner rights. Mr. Chimento, even if this land were to go back to nature, not all of us live on fairways that will return to forest. Many of us have no trees growing even years later. Furthermore, some of us live where the grass doesn't grow to this day, given to the extreme use of pesticides in this course, in my opinion. And even if trees, weeds, and forests grow back, it is significantly better to view that than the basic housing your developer is proposing. There is land here that you can develop that does not impact the residents. Develop it and accept the city staff recommendations. Council, he will be able to develop parts of this land. You do not have to allow for him to develop it all at the expense of the residents and their rights. Please adhere to the residents' pleas and act in their best interest on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
How come you got away from showing the people?
Go ahead.
I don't know.
Sir, you can speak now.
Maybe the person was taking a break.
Sir, you're on the record. Can you speak your name and start speaking, please?
Isn't that the podium? Yep. It's like it's frozen. Oh no, she moved her head.
You're on the record, sir, ma'am. You're on the record. Can you please state your name for the record, and your 3 minutes will begin? Okay.
Yo.
Next caller.
Yes, my name is Justin Simmons. I live at 39 Lake Success Drive. I just want to put a little perspective in the conversation. The applicant's council has talked a lot about facing reality, that reality is not a golf course anymore. Well, the reality is that from the residents' perspective, we all paid, bought houses on there to have a golf course view. Whether the golf course is in function or not matters not. We all paid. We're not getting anything out of this whole deal. We're just trying to mitigate our losses. That view, I can see the old clubhouse. Well, I could until you tore it down. I enjoy watching sunsets at the back of my house. I think the point of all this is to meet in the middle between the developer who bought the land and the citizens who have rights. And the city planning, the staff's recommendations are that halfway mark, that meet in the middle mark. Even so, we gain nothing. We are only losing as citizens. The developer is gaining. And from our perspective, it feels like any conversation that's going further past staff towards applicant proposals is just taking more and more and more. We gain nothing, we lose everything, and nobody's going to be giving anybody anything after this is all said and done. We lose property value, or maybe we maintain. That's the best case scenario. So the reality is, we all bought in, we're trying to maintain, and the reason so many people are passionate and angry is because basically we're just mitigating our losses at this point, hoping that the city stands up for our rights. We're not saying you can't build, the land has changed, but I paid money for acres and acres behind my house to not have anything on but a golf course. And if they're not playing golf course on it, fine. I like watching the animals, the deer that come into my backyard. My children fish in the lake. I don't want to see things happen to that. You know, citizens come first. The citizens who already live there versus ones who maybe or may not, you know? So just keep the citizens in mind. The city officials, you know, your constituents are your first concern. first and foremost, and we're not totally against development. We're just against taking away our investment. Because this is most of us, our biggest investment in our life. We're all going to die or retire in these homes. We would just like that piece, that wonderful, wonderful North Palm Coast L section piece to remain. Thank you for the work staff has done in their proposal. Hopefully, the City Council will, follow your guidelines and those things, protections for the citizens. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker.
Hello, my name is Erin, and I'm a resident of the L section. I think this development is a great plan. I think it leaves a reasonable amount of buffer room between the houses so they can still have their privacy and wildlife. I think this development will be beneficial for our flooding issues in the L section. With the current condition of what was the golf course, it's an eyesore in my opinion, and this is a great improvement for our neighborhood. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you. One more, Doug?
There's a couple more.
Hi, my name is Deborah Carlin. We live at 9 Lee Place. We have an unobstructed view of Tract 3. We are just questioning, the planning board had sent the plans back for no building on Tract 3, but now the builder's back again with homes on Tract 3. Just concerned about the length of traffic, the length of construction, the number of cars up and down Lakeview, and just the idea of having land torn up and homes being built for the next 5 years is a bit much, since there are still many, many undeveloped lots in Matanzas Woods in the neighborhood. Right now, I can't, there's probably 2 or 3 homes going up every day. In our cul-de-sac alone, we've had 3 homes built in 3 years. So I'm just asking you to consider our views and our quality of life, and we would like to see it stay as it is. It's a nice, quiet area, and we stayed here for a reason, and we love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are they unmuted?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, can you please state your name for the record?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, how many more people are ahead of me?
You're it. You're calling in. So your 3 minutes will begin.
Yes, I'm calling in. When?
Your 3 minutes will begin after you state your name for the record, ma'am.
Okay, well, I'm watching the video and there's somebody talking now.
It's a delayed response, ma'am.
Okay. All right. I'll give my name and then make my statement.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Vicki Renna. I live on London Drive. As you know, Palm Coast has a long history dating back almost 50 years. What you may not know is that IT&T in the late 1960s hired a nationally recognized environmental planning and design firm from Pennsylvania to prepare the first comprehensive plan. John Simons, a famous landscape architect and co-founder of this firm, designed the subdivision in Matanzas Woods. Mr. Simon seriously considered the natural environment and limitations of the land itself in the design of the subdivision, and his expertise was to promote the harmonious relationship between humans and the environment. It is no wonder the central core of Matanzas Woods, which is basically Tract 1 and 3, interconnect with central open space, which is so vital to the community and the value of the lots in the entire neighborhood. One major access way was provided by Matanzas Woods into Matanzas Woods neighborhood, which provides further privacy I'm calling in right now. So anyway, there's vast amount of wildlife. The IT&T established restriction, covenants, and ease to further protect the land, and lot sizes were not allowed to be any smaller than 10,000 square feet. These are all the reasons why we invested our hard-earned money into this neighborhood. I can't appreciate that the developer is trying to meet the needs because Mr. Simons is a hard act to follow, and his focus was more on open space and spacing homes around the area versus cookie-cutter lot designs. Unfortunately, this developer does not understand spatial layout, and all the proposals have been very linear. I do appreciate all the buffers he's proposing, but I'm very concerned if this project moves forward, it will decrease our values. You have sections in your code which require creative land design. You are also losing 120 acres of open space that was put a part of your comprehensive plan, which I would like to see the city contribute some financial money to create some open space. No lot should be any smaller than the lot of SR2, which is 7,000 square feet. The SR1 only allows 10 feet between the homes, and that is too close.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. That concludes your comments. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Good evening, Isabel Garcia from Longfellow Drive.
Good evening. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Isabel Garcia from Longfellow Drive. I just wanted to submit my support for the application, as I believe it would be good for our property values as opposed to the current state of the golf course. Thank you.
Any others, Doug?
Mayor, I see no one else indicating to speak.
Thank you. We're going to start answering some questions. I have taken some notes. I've asked both the applicant and our staff to take notes. I would first start with Mr. Arnold's comments.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Mayor, could you repeat that? I was walking out.
It was about the surety bond, when does it start, per unit, per section, in escrow, proof of funds.
I'm not sure how to answer that. That's not part of the land development code. I'm not sure what we need to do. I do know that when development is done in many municipalities, including Palm Coast, that there are performance bonds and maintenance bonds put in place at the time of platting. His request that my client, show proof of funds or those types of things, I'm not sure how to accommodate it. I'm not familiar with a surety bond that would in any way be able to be put in place to accommodate a guaranteed.
Our city attorney will answer that.
Sure. Yeah, what we're talking about here is in the land development code, and of course I'm going to tag team if necessary with our development services folks. But there's going to come a point in time, if this moves forward, where there's going to be some proposals for the actual groundbreaking, and there's infrastructure, and that infrastructure eventually, if it's going to be dedicated to the public, it's going to be the responsibility of the citizens to maintain it in the future. So what the land development code does is it says, look, you're going to provide some sort of insurance, so that when you give us this infrastructure, if it's not built according to code and it causes problems, we have the right, because we're going to be a named insured under this insurance policy, to go against this insurance company for money if we have to spend it to fix this road or this retention pond or whatever the infrastructure is. The code, the land development code, specifies the nature of that insurance. And it's either a performance bond or it's a surety bond, but it's an insurance policy. And the city of Palm Coast is going to be named as an additional party insured.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I may. Also, after the planning board tabled the item and asked us to work with the the applicant some more. One of the things they asked us to work on was bonding requirements for any soil contaminant mitigation that may need to occur. So we wrote stronger language into that, into the MPD, requiring a bond if any contaminant removal was going to be required by the state or federal agencies that monitor that.
Okay, can you take Mr. Martin's second question about restricted covenants, and did you make those notes?
Yes, I think.
And I can talk
yes,
about
please.
that too. Restrictive covenants are created at the time of development before all the parcels are subdivided. And it's a contract under Florida law between the homeowners and potentially the developer and potentially a mandatory association. It's my understanding that the original Matanzas Woods had covenants and restrictions, but they did not have a mandatory homeowners association. So this is a private contract, not involving the city of Palm Coast. Our job today is to make sure that whatever we approve is consistent with our comprehensive plan and our land development code. With that said, our review of the documents that have been provided to us do not specifically require and mandate that this property in perpetuity remain a golf course.
Mayor, excuse me. I believe we missed Mr. Arnold's first question, which was for the applicant. If the 100-foot buffer from the property, was it from the property line or from property line or to the structure?
It's property line.
Do you want to take the question of impact fees then again? Mr. Arnold also addressed impact fees and collection of impact fees.
I think, well, I didn't see a question there. It was more of a comment, I think, about if he thought it would be appropriate to not give credits, is what I heard.
Your view on that?
It's not, normally if a developer does improvements that benefit the whole community, they would get credits. That would work for roads or parks. It would be, obviously, they'd be equivalent to what they contributed.
I'm going to take some of these questions that were collectively similar, meaning arsenic was brought up a few times, so let's talk about the arsenic issue. There was a study that was done.
Yeah, there was a preliminary study that they did, and then after the planning board meeting, the first planning board meeting, we also added additional language in 11.20 that at the time of subdivision or platting or site planning, they need to provide us another study of that specific area that meets all federal and state regulations. So we added some additional protection. I mean, the preliminary study that they did shows that there is some contamination, but we're also going to require at specific tracts where there's going to be development that they also provide an assessment of that area.
We've heard a lot about the size of the property. 6,000 square feet is not acceptable. So did you Mr. Robert King asked about specific tracts, just about need? Like, do we have to qualify a need for that?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It really, there was, as I heard two words that were thrown out there for discussion, and one of them was justification versus entitlement. And for purposes of our decision this evening on whether or not this developer should receive what he's asking for, the standard is what are his development rights, existing vested development rights, and then analyzing what he's asking for, again, under the entitlements that are already created for this property owner under our land development code and our comprehensive plan. What it doesn't consider, what our comp plan and our property code, our land development code don't consider is there an immediate need for the number of lots that are being requested? I mean, for better or for worse, that's just not a standard that's relevant for us to consider. That's really more of a risk for the property owner going forward.
Someone from staff answer where the previous 700,000. Are you involved with that?
Yeah, I'm the man tonight. As everyone knows, probably in this room, for a long, long, painful period of time, not this property owner, but a prior property owner of this former golf course, was not doing what this property owner should have been doing, which is maintaining it to the fairways and the greens to a shorter, the grass was not a golf course, but it would be so that it wasn't growing wild. And it was initiated, code enforcement was initiated, and it took a while, and eventually the code board found that they were in violation and a daily fine was accruing, and it continued to accrue till the point that the code board said, look, we're going to direct the city attorney's office to initiate foreclosure, which we did. At that point in time, that property owner, not Mr. Chimento's client, but that prior property owner filed bankruptcy. So at that point in time, we had a property that wasn't going anywhere. It was a disaster for the community. And the bankruptcy, as some of you may know, properties can sit in bankruptcy for a long, long time. So the current property owner came forward and made a proposal that they would buy the property, take it out of bankruptcy, and start maintaining the property consistent with what the code board had originally required, consistent with the code. And as part of that resolution, the city was paid, I think it was around $170,000. And that was not the full amount of the fines, but it was the full amount to the penny of all of the hard costs, attorney's fees, and all of the costs that were associated by the city staff during this multi-year process of trying to enforce the code and protect this community. And so the city, from that standpoint, was made whole. And I want to make one more additional comment, and that is people say, well, why didn't you get to $700,000? The purpose of code enforcement, folks, and I say this almost every month in code enforcement because people are always asking for a reduction of the fines. The purpose of code enforcement is not to make a profit. The purpose of code enforcement is trying to comply with the code. And so this is what happens all the time in code enforcement, and that is that fines are reduced in return for code compliance. And that's what happened as a result of that resolution, where this property owner acquired the property, fixed it up, as was described earlier, and paid the city every penny the city was owed for hard costs.
Will you go through some and see if there's any other outstanding questions? There are specific questions that we want to make sure we're answering. Track 9, I think Joe had asked about the lake, Mr. Chimento.
Well, if we go to track 1.
Track 9.
Track 9.
Track 9, okay.
The back of the buildings, the commercial.
Okay, track 9, thank you, I apologize. All right, track 9, the green area is the area that is existing, we'll call them ponds and conveyance systems of the defunct golf course. Those are not being maintained, they're not part of a functioning stormwater system, so they're filling in and growing in. That area that people talked about viewing wildlife will be preserved in that 100-foot buffer from the rear of their property lines back 100 feet. We will place a conservation easement over that area so that it will not change and it will not be amended.
So about the back of the commercial buildings?
There's no layout of any buildings presently, but your land development code does talk about lighting requirements when it's adjacent to residential homes. They may be the side, it may be the front, it may be the rear. I can't specifically tell you that, but I would just imagine, to be candid, it'll probably be part of the rear of some of those buildings, but it'll be building and then the 100 feet. And those buildings also have a height limitation of 35 feet. And they also have to take into account buffering, lighting, what else, Mr. Tyner? Those types of things. Yeah. So again, there's nothing specific planned for that parcel right now.
Okay. Is track 8 selling to another developer?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Tract 8, if I may, if we could put tract 8, Mr. Hoover. And we've talked to many of the residents in there. There is an existing pond, and along the northern side of that pond, there is a large stand of trees. Those will all remain, the existing pond, and the homeowners that are along that pond do maintain our property down to the water's edge, and that can be, we're fine with maintaining that. So those homeowners' views won't change at all.
Did you say any other outstanding?
I did, there was a couple, and I wrote all the questions down, Mayor, and there was a couple I put an L next to, which I thought might be legal. So I'm going to first go through what some of the other questions are, and I'm not sure that I'm the right, but there was a question about Tract 9 and whether the pond was going away.
We just answered that.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, but
The answer was yes.
If you go to Tract 9, it's not.
Yeah.
No, I was talking about, let's go to Tract 9, please.
see, I think, yeah, this is Tract 8 versus Tract 9.
So Tract 9, in the rear of those homes, I got it.
It isn't a bad spot.
No, it's, yeah,
Folks,
sir,
folks, this is
sir.
not a discussion, folks. This
Yeah.
is just, we're trying to answer all your questions. So we're at a different part of the evening tonight. We're trying to address your questions. Thank you very much for your prior comments.
9.
In the area that you see as green, that is 100 feet VPZ, there are ponds, old stormwater ponds, and they're connected and interconnected. They do no longer function because it's not a functioning golf course. Those areas will be maintained in their existing state under the proposed VPZ, so they will not be modified or changed.
Okay, because I thought you said something different previous, so, okay.
Mayor, I have a couple too that I've documented down too. So we heard a lot of comments on environmental resources and threatened endangered species. You know, this is a rezoning. You're more of a 35,000 foot level. When and if this project comes in for development or subdivisions, we require environmental resource investigations for both threatened and endangered species, and we require a certified biologist or somebody who's qualified to do that work. And they do their investigation and they submit that information to us. The applicant will have to, you know, abide by all federal and state requirements, including the City of Palm Coast. There was another question regarding the comp plan and open space that this proposal, you know, get us out of compliance with our comp plan when it comes to open space. We are absolutely in compliance with our comprehensive plan as it relates to acres of active recreation and passive recreation, so that is not an issue. The green belt, someone asked a comment, what can be done in the green belt, and you know, the green belt is a future land use map designation. That is not being changed tonight. Someone had questioned that. The green belt is your future land use map designation, and that allows for 1 unit per acre. And then the zoning that we're doing tonight is citing where those units could be.
I also would want to add that your comprehensive plan recognizes the value of clustering. For example, let's say you have 100 acres and it's green belt with 1 dwelling unit per acre. The full extreme of one end of it is you have 100 1-acre lots.
Smart growth.
Okay, versus clustering, which is arguably closer to what this proposal is, whether you like that or not. That's what the comp plan encourages.
Yep. Okay. Any other outstanding staff?
Mayor, there's a couple of questions that I think needs some clarity, and that is tracks 3 and 1 and the issues of size of lots that maybe I didn't make clear to the community. So if we go to track 3, the adjacent lots to track 3 are standard Palm Coast lots, 80 by 120. So they're roughly 9,000 square feet. The lots on track 3 will be 12,000 square feet, so they'll actually be larger than the adjacent lots. We heard that in the December meeting in the community, because originally they were 50-foot lots on a double-sided road, if you recall looking at that. So we went back and changed that. So those lots are actually the same, if not larger, than the adjacent lots, is what the community was asking. And to give better assurances to the community, we got a broker, a local broker, to do an opinion of that and we can share that. And it just basically talks about the value of homes on 12,000 square foot lots range from $300,000 to $450,000, depending upon how they're finished. As it relates to Tract 1 is consistent with your land development code of SFR1, and the reason they are there is because as we shrink the area of development or increase the areas of VPZ that we have there, it has less land, and so we're not able to put 12,000 square foot lots there, and that's why we have the 7,000 square foot lots on Tract 1.
Okay, I think we're concluding the comments and questions that were made. Okay, I think I've answered. Okay, council, I'm going to take it back to this board for further questions or discussions.
Not at this specific time.
Yeah, I have questions.
Go ahead.
On track, well, I just saw track 3. On track 1, is that going to be a gated community or just a regular?
We have proposed it to be a gated community.
But it's going to be a gated community?
But it doesn't necessarily have to be. And again, we're here to try to make a development that is special for all involved.
How long would the project take once they break ground?
Absent an economic issue, what we're seeing in the market right now, that it would take about a year to deliver the lots. And then, for example, the development on the west side of US 1, they've sold 250 lots within the first year, and this would be significantly less. So by the time a year gets done to build the lots and then to build the homes, maybe 2 more years after that, but it could be longer. It's about a year to do the infrastructure, sir.
Go ahead. Are you done?
No.
Go ahead.
It looks like there's a big impact on the way of life here by the numbers of people that have spoken. So on that case, I'd like to make a motion to accept the city's original staff recommendations. No development along the fairways 1, 3, and 9.
Is there a second?
Sorry, what was the rest of the motion? I didn't hear the rest of the motion you made.
Can you repeat the motion, please?
Make a motion to accept the city's original staff recommendations. No development along the fairways 1, 3, and 9.
That in the city's, is that the full city recommendation of the no development part?
Yeah, that's a very good question, council member. I think it's important for us to make sure that we get the record clear about what it is that you're proposing as far as this motion. We've got several options that have come to us this evening. One is the recommendation of the PLDRB. You are not proposing that in your motion. We have the request of the applicant this evening. You are not proposing that. What I understand your motion to be is to the original staff recommendation that went to the PLDRB. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I don't have the ability to know whether the original staff recommendation of PLDRB was exactly what you just described after you said that. I think it would be clear for the record what the original staff recommendation was that went to PLDRB. And if that's what, I mean, whether or not that's consistent with the rest of your motion, I can't answer that. That would be, I'm going to defer to staff on that.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do our best. Well, let's start with track 9 because the planning board changed track 9 from the staff recommendation. The planning board accepted that only 8.3 acres of the 20 plus acres could be developed. The staff recommendation had the entire 8.3 acres on the northern portion of Tract 9 behind letter B of Tract 10 that you see there.
The staff recommendation gives more development.
No, the staff recommendation was more restrictive. It didn't allow the 8.3 acres to be spread throughout the entire tract. It kept it to the northern section behind the other parcels owned by the applicant, which are Tract 10.
Okay, go ahead.
Tract 1, planning board and staff was consistent.
All the other ones.
Tract 3, planning board and staff were consistent. I'm trying to think if we added just a, we'd have to go back and look when planning board asked for the change or the additional bonding requirements for any soil contamination mitigation that might occur. I don't.
That was after the first planning board.
Yeah, we had it in there for them.
For the second.
Okay, so
Yes.
okay. And then actually there was also on Tract 8, staff, the applicant, and the planning board all agreed that the conservation should be looked at on a ground investigation rather than from an aerial investigation. So it's only Tract 9 then.
Did you get that, Mr.? Do you agree with the assessment still with your motion?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second? Seeing no second, I'll take it back to this council and entertain another motion.
I still had a question for staff.
Yes, go ahead.
So for the park exchange, I'm sorry. Sorry for speaking to the not speaking to the microphone. For the land that we could exchange for a park, my question for staff would be what the approximate cost to build a park of that magnitude. I know that the council has identified the Matanzas Woods area as needing a park during our strategic action planning sessions. My question would be, what kind of amount of funding are we looking to start a park, and then how long in units of development would it take to recoup that monetary amount for the park? So basically, how long would it take to accrue credits on not necessarily a time duration, but how many developments would have to occur, how many homes would have to be built?
If Carl Cody is available, he could probably speak better to what a roughly 4-acre park costs to develop. Obviously, it's going to depend on what you put in it, if it's a passive park, an active park, and what type of equipment goes in it.
This is Carl Cody from Stormwater Engineering Department. Yeah, Jason is correct in stating that it all depends what you want to develop on the park site. You know, in generic terms, you know, typically an acre development is about $200,000 if we're going to be adding some parking and landscaping and stormwater improvements. You know, if we decide to put in a restroom building there or what other type of features could affect that cost. So the cost could vary greatly. You know, a 4-acre site, you know, depending on what you want to do there. If it's just a couple of basketball courts and a small playground, a little parking lot and a restroom building, you know, you're probably talking, you know, $1 million or so. It could change. Our park impact fee is varying over the next couple of years. It's ramping up to about the $1,500 per home. So it would take quite a few homes to get to that.
Gotcha. And my next question would be, as the impact fees are collected for Parks and Rec from this development, would we be able to apply them, not necessarily in real time, but would we have to wait for the next fiscal cycle to be able to apply those Parks and Rec dollars, or could this be a park as it's built out around it?
Carl, if you could, that sounds like a CIP question.
Yeah, right now, you know, our 5-year plan, the dollars in our park impact fee, you know, we're guessing on future development, you know, in there. There's not a lot of extra dollars in that account to build something up front and get reimbursed in the future. So this would be more than likely we'd collect the dollars, and when the dollars were in the bank, we would move forward with construction.
Understood. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And if, Councilman Clufus, to answer your first question, 268 units in kind of an estimate of where impact fees might be in the next year or so, because if you remember, they're being tiered up. It would generate somewhere between $350,000 and $420,000, depending on when they came online.
Understood.
Mr. Clufus, if I may, I think this is the difficulty of where we're at right now. I don't think staff understands our proposal. We had proposed on Tract 3 to give you 4 acres, to give you, not get impact fee credits for it. And then in addition to that, the homes that are built in that area would be impounded their impact fees so that the community would be able to use those funds from that impact to build that park. That can be done through park impact fees. That doesn't mean that the developer can't front the money to get park impact fee credits. So, you know, this is where I sit right now, that I'm hearing a lot of confusion about the proposal, and I'm not sure we're getting clarity for you all.
I think I was pretty clear.
That was much, yeah. I need the clarity.
Well, he had said that we were going to get park impact fees for the land, and I'm saying that's not what we had asked for.
Gotcha. Understood.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. Okay, council, any other questions or comments? Do need a motion on the floor, please.
Can I make a motion to table it? There's a lot of questions and a lot of people that it looks like it's going to be a hardship for them.
But we've answered all the questions.
Okay.
I'm confused.
All right.
No, but I'm saying, I mean, table it for what?
See if we could change some stuff that people will agree better to.
Can I ask a question of staff?
Yeah.
Is there any possibility of you folks getting together and ironing out, or have you done everything you guys are all going to do? And
Councilman, we have been consistent that we were not willing to negotiate our interpretation, but you can provide your own interpretation of what a VPZ is, and you can spell out, as Mr. Reichman stated at the beginning, you can spell out from A to Z exactly what you would like to see.
Let me say, I mean, we have 3 options of putting motions on the floor. One is to accept the developer's recommendation. Second is to recommend or accept the planning board's recommendation. Third would be to accept the staff's original recommendation. And fourth is to vote no and vote why you're voting no. So there's 4 options that we have the ability to do tonight.
I have a comment. Just to answer the question, can we work with this stuff?
If the mayor will indulge.
From a procedural standpoint, I want to make sure we're there is a pending motion to table. I have not heard a second.
That is correct.
If there isn't a second, then,
Yes.
okay. So we're back where we were, waiting for a motion.
I think that, again, is there a motion?
So in my opinion, the problems that have been presented to us today have been, looking in the purview of this meeting, have been addressed, and it's kind of gone back and forth multiple times. My motion is to approve the applicant's submission as it is here, and as proposed.
Applicants tonight?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second? None, it dies for a lack of second. Is there another motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve our planning boards.
Is there a second?
Something.
Well, we've exhausted all 3 options except for one. Is there a motion?
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, what's the other option?
To deny.
And let me add to that. If there is going to be a motion to deny, you expect me to defend that. If there's a court challenge, I'm going to need for the motion to specify why there is a denial. on what legal grounds, what was established to deny this. What part of the code, land development code, or the comprehensive plan were not satisfied in order to support a motion to deny? Because that is required by the Florida statutes.
So is there a motion to that magnitude?
May I interject, please? Madam?
What?
I believe the sticking point, as they talked about, is the definition of what is a reasonable VPZ. And if city staff got clear direction from council as to how to define the notion that it's not clear, as Mr. Tyner has said, that the parties could come back and identify ways to improve the entire development, giving the city and the community some of the proposed community projects that are not presently in staff's proposal. And I think Mr. Morton and I have discussed is that until we understand what is meant by this VPZ, staff and the developer have different ideas and aren't able to be creative and come back to you with a proposal that might satisfy you all, the community, the developer. Would that be fair, Mr. Morton?
I think we have a motion in a second. I don't think I'm supposed to be speaking.
Yeah, I think staff has made their position very clear, and, you know, they have an impasse, and they've made that extraordinarily clear. So if someone wants to repeat one of their motions to see if we can get a second, to see if we can come up with a compromise, one would be Councilmember Barbosa originally proposed, staff's original proposal, Councilmember Denko proposed the planning boards, and then Councilmember Clufus made a motion to support the applicants. So
I will make my motion again to support the planning boards.
And, you know, I will hand over the gavel and second that, so. Okay.
Mr. Vice Mayor, we have a motion and a second. The call would be for any further discussion, and if not, then a vote, then a roll call vote.
Yes, due to the fact that we have a motion and being second, do we have any further discussion on this?
So I had a little discussion here. If we go forward with the PLDRB's recommendation, does that create a higher propensity chance that there's going to be more dense housing because they're unable to develop more single-family lots on this property? So are we going to have unintentional effects of what we're doing by choosing the PLDRB's recommendation versus the applicants? And if the end goal is for keeping multifamily housing to a minimum? Because with less space, they're still going to be allowed a certain density level, and now because there's less space, that density is obviously going to have to be higher, correct?
Well, I think it's also going to just be, that's how many units they can fit on that. So that's what's going to be approved. And we have the ability to approve that when it comes back to us.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
But still, allowing them more space would allow them to submit a plan that would include more single-family homes, much like I believe the presenter spoke earlier. But as long as everyone's aware of that, less space, obviously density numbers are going to be higher.
But again, I think we have control over that, so.
Does the motion remain the same?
Yes.
We have a roll call?
Just for the purposes of, just for the purposes of the record, the motion is to approve the recommendation on this matter from the PLDRB.
Yes.
Correct.
Mayor Holland?
Yes.
Councilmember Barbosa?
No.
Councilmember Danko?
Yes.
Councilmember Clufus?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Branquinho?
No.
Motion passes 3-2.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm going to give you the gavel back.
Thank you. Let me find my agenda item. Okay, I just need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Yes, thank you.
We are adjourned.